One last day of summer. Lacey was frustrated. It had been a long day of boring lectures. Lacey felt that if somebody could make even the 1960s sound like a boring time, they really shouldn't be allowed to teach. Especially at the beginning of the semester. They'd pose a suicide risk for the students. She had told her boyfriend Robin that over lunch. Well, he wasn't really her boyfriend, they were more like friends with benefits. He had made all the right, sympathetic noises, but she knew he'd been ogling one of the new psychology professors. Lacey had to snap her fingers in Robin's face to wake him up. She had said that she didn't really blame him for looking. After all, it was impressive how she looked like she was in her early 30s while she had to be at least a decade older, but that hadn't been true. She had been feeling down and looking for some sympathy, not a not-quite boyfriend who couldn't keep his attention on her for 2 minutes. In hindsight, she regretted not just getting up and leaving right there and then. Instead, she had played the part of the loyal friend and stuck around until Robin had had to leave for class. After that, Lacey had had to endure another couple of classes that thankfully weren't quite as bad as the history lecture, but they had still been annoyingly tedious. Add to that 4 hours of work, and by the time Lacey returned to her tiny apartment, she was just about ready to strangle someone. She really wasn't cut out for work in the retail sector, particularly during back-to-school sales. Even flying around Azeroth on her favorite World of Warcraft character failed to relax her. There was really only one thing to do. Lacey went to bed early. For Lacey, getting ready for bed when she was feeling like this was a little more elaborate than normally. She started by pulling out the bottom towel from the neatly folded stack in her tiny bathroom. It was the biggest and softest of them all, and she always made sure to put it at the bottom of the stack so she wouldn't grab it by mistake. Lacey moved the table out of the way, pulled out the sleeper sofa and quickly made the bed. Next, she spread the towel out on the bed and folded it several times. After stripping, she sat down on the towel and pulled it up between her legs. She slipped her feet into a pair of oversized granny panties and pulled them up so they held the towel in place. Lacey didn't need the diaper, but for some reason she liked the feeling of being padded. She always had. The thicker the better. If she couldn't bring her legs together, that was perfect. She had lost count of how often she had woken up with most of her duvet stuffed between her legs when she was younger. As she grew older, she had begun to do it intentionally before she fell asleep. At first just using a blanket or her duvet, but eventually she switched to towels. Lacey had never shared this with anyone, but whenever she was stressed or upset, the temptation was always there. And more often than not, she acted on it. Lacey could almost feel the tension leave her body as she lay on her bed, the evening sun peeking in around the edges of her curtains and the warm summer air making a slight sheen of sweat appear on her skin. She slipped a hand inside her diaper and lazily played with herself while she listened to the traffic outside. Eventually, she drifted off to sleep. Lacey awoke with a start and found she couldn't move. She was completely paralyzed as a cool draft raised goosebumps on her clammy skin. Some oddly calm corner of her mind worried how it would look if somebody saw her like this, wearing a big diaper and with one hand inside it. If Chris saw me like this, I'd never hear the end of it. Lacey's thoughts were interrupted by a metallic gurgling sound. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see the mirror next to the door. It looked less like a mirror and more like a vertical pool of mercury. Part of its surface was oozing down the wall to form a shiny puddle on the floor. Then something rose out of the puddle, human-shaped, but with a mirror finish. The annoyingly detached and nerdy part of Lacey's mind noted that it was just like the T-1000 Terminator. Its surface dulled and it turned around and it was her. It looked exactly like Lacey. It was wearing the same bulky diaper and granny panties. It even had the same tattoo of a fox barely visible over the waistband of the panties, except it was on the wrong hip. The mirror image walked over to the bed and sat down next to Lacey, who pretended to be asleep, peering out through almost closed eyes. It wasn't very hard since she couldn't really move anything else anyway. "Oh, stop that," the mirror image said. "I know you're awake." She reached out and brushed the hair out of Lacey's face. Lacey felt her muscles relaxing as the paralysis began to fade away. She tried to pull her hand out of her diaper, but the mirror image stopped her. Just leave it there for now. We both know you like that. How? Lacey whispered. Well, duh. I thought that'd be obvious by now. I know that your cell phone PIN number is your birthday backwards, divided by 3. I know you almost flunked history last term. The mirror image reached down to touch her own tattoo. I know who held your hand while you got this and how you still have a bottle of her shampoo in your bathroom. She stroked Lacey's cheek. I know everything about you because I am you. I meant, how is this pos? Hang on, I do not have a bottle of Suki's shampoo, Lacey protested. No, you're right. It's her conditioner. But that's not what's important, nor is how I'm here. What matters is why I'm here. And why is that? Lacey was slowly trying to slide away. You had a crap day. You were annoyed that summer is almost over and that you're back in school with all the drama that entails. You wanted some sympathy and maybe a good hug, but that dumbass Chris was too busy thinking about that hottie professor. Yeah, Lacey admitted reluctantly. So I'm here to make you a deal. The mirror image took Lacey's hand in hers and looked into her eyes. Do you remember when you were little? When summers lasted almost forever and you didn't have to worry about anything. Yeah. Wouldn't you like that again? The mirror image slowly stroked Lacey's hand. No stupid job or classes to go to, no responsibilities. Not a care in the world. Millimeter HM, Lacey said dreamily. I can make it that way again, the mirror image said and rose from the bed. Take my hand. In a daze, Lacey swung her legs out of bed and got up. She walked behind the other Lacey towards the mirror, holding her hand. The mirror was so narrow that her mirror image had to step through it sideways, vanishing through the slowly rippling surface. When she pulled Lacey along and her hand made contact with the mirror, she expected it to feel cold, but it didn't. It felt more like a warm, heavy mist or fog. Lacey closed her eyes as she stepped through, and when she opened them again she was still standing in her apartment, except it was different somehow. It took her a couple of moments to notice a magazine on the table, but then she realized that everything was mirrored. Come along now, said the mirror image. Or was Lacey the mirror image on this side of the mirror? Still holding the other Lacey's hand with one hand and holding up the sagging towel diaper with the other, Lacey followed other Lacey through the door. They emerged in the middle of a small clearing surrounded by trees. Looking back, Lacey saw a small shed. Other Lacey was saying something, but Lacey was still mesmerized by the surroundings. She bent down and picked one of the flowers next to her bare foot. It's incredible. This even smells real. Lacey breathed deeply, smelling grass and wildflowers. It is real, other Lacey said. Now come along. There's somebody I want you to meet. Like this. Lacey suddenly became aware of what she was wearing. Oh, nobody will mind. No worries, remember. Other Lacey took Lacey's hand and pulled her along into the forest. When they came out of the forest, they were at the top of a small hill. Below them was a large house, a pond and a large garden with big trees. We just missed lunch, but there should be some food left. When they came closer, Lacey realized that everything about the house was a little scaled up. The windows were just a foot higher up than usual, the door was bigger, the steps up the porch was just a little too high to easily walk up. It all gave her the distinct feeling of being smaller than usual. Other Lacey opened the door and walked in, pulling her acutely self-conscious Lacey along. Inside was a kitchen with the same oversized tables and chairs. There was a giant of a woman putting plates and glasses in the sink. She must have been almost 7 feet tall and looked like she was in her early 50s. She had that air about her that grandmothers do, even though she was a little young for it. Hey Mom, look who finally came to join us, other Lacey said. She turned to Lacey and whispered, her real name's Ella, but she likes it when we call her Mom. Lacey. Ella exclaimed and came over to give Lacey a hug. We've been waiting for so long. Let me have a look at you. Lacey unsuccessfully tried to cover up her bare chest and the diapers. No, that simply won't do. Come with me, dear. Ella took Lacey's hand and led her out of the kitchen and down the hall to a bathroom. You hop up here, she said and patted what looked like a piece of the kitchen counter. Lacey realized that it was a giant changing table and just stood there in front of it, dumbstruck. Oh, come on now. You're a bit too big for me to lift you. Lacey looked around and saw a stool next to the changing table. She used it to clamber up onto the table and sat there with her feet dangling over the edge. Lie back, dear, Ella said as she grabbed Lacey's legs and slid her further back. Lacey lay back on the smooth, warm surface. Are you still dry? She asked and unceremoniously slipped a couple of fingers inside Lacey's diaper. Lacey jumped. Hey, she blurted out. Of course I am. Ella pulled the granny panties and towel diaper off Lacey in one quick yank, leaving her naked and desperately trying to cover up. Oh, come now. It's nothing I haven't seen 100 times before, she said. Now lift your butt. Without thinking, Lacey did as she was told and Ella slid a diaper under butt. She quickly pulled it up between her legs and taped the whole thing in place. The whole operation took only seconds. She helped Lacey sit up and Lacey looked down at the teddy bear print. This is so weird. She reached down to touch it, somehow doubting that any of this was real. The plastic backing rustled softly when she did. Now, let's see if this doesn't fit you. Ella held up a light blue summer dress. She slipped it over Lacey's head and helped her with the sleeves before helping her down from the changing table. Now you go outside and play with the others. Lacey walked back to the kitchen and out onto the porch, wondering what Ella had meant by the others. But once she set foot outside, she heard excited voices from the other side of the house. She tiptoed to the corner and peeked around it. By the pond she could see 4 children playing. No, not children. They were adults dressed as children. Then it struck her, so was she. Lacey crept closer, ducking behind bushes until she was close enough to hear what they were talking about. It seemed the 3 of them, 2 girls and a boy, were having an argument about some kind of race in the brook that fed the pond. Eventually, they decided that the only way to settle it was another race. They picked up their crude wooden boats and ran upstream. I can see you, you know. Lacey froze. Oh, come on. That blue dress isn't exactly camouflage. Feeling like she had been caught trespassing, Lacey slowly emerged from behind her bush to see who had spoken. It was another boy. No, not boy, man. He was maybe in his late 20s, average height, a little chubby, with a deep tan and mop of curly brown hair. All in all not entirely unattractive, Lacey thought. He was sitting on a stone with his knees pulled up and his arms around them. Hi. Hi, I'm Alistair. Lacey. So, you're gonna want to have a seat for the today's grand final of the race, Alistair said wearily. I think the score is like 1,000 points to Francine and 1,000 points to George. So they're tied. Lacey sat down on the stone next to Alistair. I have no idea, I've lost count. But they should have time to finish before the rain starts. What do you mean? See that cloud over there? Alistair pointed towards the mountains in the distance. The one that sort of looks like a fish. Yeah. When it's on the other side of that mountaintop, it'll start to rain. How do you know that? Lacey looked at Alistair. He sighed. That's how it is every day. It'll start to rain and we go inside to play. It'll stop halfway through dinner. What do you mean every day? Every day is the same here. I've tried to figure out the routine, but this place gets inside your head. Makes you forget numbers and letters and dash. Who are you? A voice interrupted from behind them. Lacey turned around to see one of the two girls that had run off earlier. Lacey was a little thrown by the childish appearance of the young woman. While she might be around 20, she was wearing a pink dress so short her diaper peeked out below the hem. She had mussed up, blonde hair and a couple of dirty smudges on her cheeks and forehead. "Charlotte, this is Lacey," Alistair said. "Lacey, Charlotte." "Like the spider," she lisped. "She's been here a while," Alistair whispered. "Like I said, this place gets inside your head. Will you be my friend?" Charlotte looked up at Lacey with a wide-eyed, innocent expression. Sure," Lacey answered. "Yay." Charlotte shouted and threw her arms around Lacey to give her a hug. The unrestrained enthusiasm surprised Lacey, but she returned the hug, rubbing Charlotte's back. "Does this mean you'll stop bugging me now?" a voice asked snidely. When Lacey looked to see who had spoken, she saw a girl with olive skin and long black hair. She was wearing overalls and a red t-shirt and was carrying a wooden boat. "I guess you must be Francine," Lacey said. "I'm Lacey." Oh, look at you talking all fancy," Francine replied and rolled her eyes. "Don't listen to her, Lacey. She's just being a meanie," Charlotte said, frowning at Francine. She grabbed Lacey's hand and pulled her towards the garden. "Come on, I want to show you something." Charlotte dragged Lacey around the entire garden, showing her the apple tree and the patch of strawberry plants. She was just about to lead Lacey back to the pond when the first raindrops began to fall. Lacey glanced towards the mountains and just like Alistair had said, the fish-shaped cloud was just past the top of it. Lacey followed a squealing Charlotte back to the house. She darted from tree to tree in an attempt to stay dry in the steadily increasing downpour. Charlotte, on the other hand, danced along the path and jumped in a couple of the small puddles that had formed by the time they reached the porch. When they reached the kitchen, Francine and George were sitting by the kitchen table coloring. George was concentrating with his tongue out. Alistair was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Alistair?" Lacey asked. Francine gave her a quick look before she returned to her coloring book. "Mama's changing him." Charlotte had already climbed onto one of the oversized chairs and started hoarding the blue and green crayons, but Lacey didn't feel like coloring. So she decided to explore the house instead. She found a large living room on the ground floor and bedrooms and an additional bathroom on the first floor. When she made her way up the steep staircase to the attic, however, she found something odd. Somebody had tied some string between the backs of two chairs and put a blanket over it, creating a small tent. Well, small compared to the chairs, it was more than big enough for Lacey. The tent itself wasn't really all that strange, but inside she found a shoebox filled with papers. Leafing through them, Lacey saw mathematical equations and calculations far more advanced than what she understood, but the closer she came to the top of the stack, the simpler the maths became. Eventually, the numbers were replaced by unidentifiable squiggles and then there were drawings of flowers. Bluebells to be precise. Sometimes a single flower, other times whole fields of them. "Do you like them?" Lacey almost jumped out of her skin. Charlotte was kneeling in the opening to the tent. She crawled in and sat down next to Lacey, taking the stack of papers from her. "You did that?" Charlotte nodded. "I wasn't very good at first, but Mama said that if I practiced I would get better. And I did, see." She picked up a new drawing from the floor outside the tent and held it up for Lacey. It was a picture of two stick figures in a green field dotted with blue flowers. One was wearing a pink dress and the other a blue one. "I made it for you," Charlotte said. Thanks. "Come on, Mama said it's dinner time." Charlotte crawled out of the tent, giving Lacey a perfect view of her soiled diaper as she did. The two girls joined Alistair and George in putting away the crayons and coloring books. They were almost done when Ella and Francine came back from the downstairs bathroom. "Okay, anybody else need a change before dinner?" Ella asked matter-of-factly. Charlotte looked away and scraped her foot on the floor. Me, she said quietly. Charlotte made us stinky. Charlotte made us stinky. Francine began singing. Lacey could see that it upset Charlotte, who looked like she was about to burst out in tears. For some reason she felt oddly protective of her. Quit picking on her. Yeah, Alistair chimed in. Stop being a meanie. Francine. Ella said sternly. Francine stopped immediately. Sorry, she mumbled, not sounding very sincere. Charlotte, however, didn't notice and went off with Ella. Lacey sat down next to Alistair. So you're all wearing diapers? She asked quietly. Yeah. That's the first thing to go. Then it's numbers and letters like I told you. And finally you don't even remember anything from before. He nodded slightly towards Francine and George. That doesn't sound so bad. I mean, apart from the diapers, this place doesn't sound all that bad. Are you kidding? It's the same day over and over and over. The rain starts at the same time every day. He pointed out the window. And by the time Mom puts the rest of the food back on the stove, it'll stop raining. Then just after sunset it'll get kinda windy. Tomorrow morning, just after breakfast, a big fish is going to jump in the pond, and so on and so on. Every day is the same, and every day you feel a little of yourself slip away. How long have you been here? Shush, Alistair said as Ella and Charlotte returned. She doesn't like us talking about that. Charlotte sat down next to Lacey. Her face was cleaned up and her hair was in pigtails. Ella looked at Lacey. How about you, dear? Are you sure you don't need a change? Lacey nodded. Okay then, Ella said and began putting plates on the table. During dinner, Ella had the children talk about what they had done that day. The stew was tasty, but a little bland. After they were done, Ella rose to put the big pot back on the stove. Alistair gave Lacey a nudge and glanced towards the window. Outside, the rain had stopped and clouds had parted to show a rosy sky. After dinner, Alistair, Charlotte and Lacey retreated to the attic. Charlotte lay on the floor, drawing, while Alistair and Lacey sat in the tent. Okay, Lacey said, so the days really are repeating themselves. Millimeter HM. And you keep forgetting your old life, little by little. Alistair nodded. Well, how quickly does it happen? I'm guessing you've been here the shortest. Actually, George came after me. I think you lose yourself more quickly if you don't resist, and he just went along with it from day one. Almost like he was running away from something. So that's what you've been doing? Fighting it. Charlotte scowled at them. Mama says, no fighting, she said solemnly. It's okay, Charlotte, we're not fighting. Kay, she said and returned to her drawing. So, how long have you been enjoying this summer? Lacey made air quotes. I don't think enjoying is the right word, and why were you doing that thing with your hands? What do you mean, oh, the air quotes? They mean. Look, never mind that. How long? I don't know, Alistair said. Numbers, remember. Okay, let's try something else then. Do you get older when you're here? Alistair shrugged. I don't think so. So what do you remember from before you came here? Do you remember who's president? I'm not sure. Kind of a goofy-looking guy. Really short name. Bush. Lacey suggested. Yeah, that's it. Bush. That means you've been here dash. And that other guy, Alistair interrupted, he'd fit right in here. He couldn't spell either. What do you mean? I don't know how to do it now, but potato. Oh my god. You meant Bush one. You've been here for, Lacey paused longer than she normally would have had to, more than 25 years. Alistair just sat there, looking more and more uncertain. I don't know, he mumbled. For a few minutes, they just sat there. The only sound was the scratching sound of Charlotte's crayons and the wind picking up outside. "So how do we get out of here?" Lacey finally asked. "I don't know. I don't even know if I ever knew. It's like I'm trapped in a dark cellar." "Why don't you just go back up the stairs?" Charlotte asked, putting down her crayons. "It's not really a cellar, Charlotte," Alistair said with a sigh. "Hang on," Lacey said. She grabbed Alistair's arm. "How did you get here?" "I'm not sure," he said hesitantly. "It's all so fuzzy. It's like it's me, but not me." "Like Dash." "A mirror image," they both said. "What do you mean?" Alistair asked. "We try what Charlotte suggested. We go out the way we came in. We'll just have to hope that it works for all of us." "So where is this way out then?" "Up the hill and into the woods," Lacey said vaguely. "That's it? We're never going to find it in the dark." "Okay, my little munchkins, it's bedtime," Ella's voice called from downstairs. "But Moom," Charlotte complained. Now, tomorrow's another day." "Okay," she said dejectedly and headed for the stairs. Alistair and Lacey followed close behind. When they came down, Ella kneeled down and wiped a smudge off Lacey's cheek. "I set up your bed in Charlotte's room since you two are such good friends already." Charlotte squealed with delight at the news. Ella handed Lacey a toothbrush. "Now you go brush your teeth while I get Charlotte ready. And Alistair, once I'm done with Charlotte it's your turn to have a bath." "Again?" Alistair whined, suddenly sounding more like a kid than before. The look Ella gave him clearly told him that the matter was not up for discussion. "Okay, Mom," he said and headed downstairs. Lacey went to the bathroom and, standing on a stool, she barely managed to reach the shelf where the toothpaste was. It was hard to control the oversized toothpaste tube and she ended up squeezing out a lot more than she intended. After she was done, Lacey took off her dress and tried to take off her diaper, but the tapes just didn't want to come loose. She even tried to wiggle out of them, but despite feeling somewhat loose, they didn't want to go down past her hips. Nor could she push it to the side to pee. The more she tried, the greater the urge became, until it was almost painful. She finally accepted the fact that the diaper was not going anywhere. She was going to have to wet it, and soon. Lacey was just standing still, almost holding her breath when she heard footsteps and Charlotte's happy chattering. "Okay, if I wet it now, I can get changed right away. That won't be so bad." Lacey tried to let go, but couldn't. Then she had an idea. She sat down on the toilet. The feeling of the toilet seat was enough of a sense memory to let Lacey let go. She felt a warm rush surround her crotch and seep towards her butt. Lacey slid off the toilet, feeling the warm squish of her diaper just as the door opened and Ella peeked in. "So," she asked, "are you still dry?" obviously seeing that Lacey wasn't. "No," Lacey said, almost whispering. Shame and frustration at having had to wet herself almost made her want to cry. Ella knelt in front of Lacey and stroked her cheek. "Don't cry, dear. That's what they're there for. Come along, Momm'll make it better." She took Lacey's hand and led her out the door. Lacey tried to grab her dress before she leaving the bathroom. "Oh, just leave it, pumpkin. Nobody'll mind." Ella led Lacey down the stairs. On the way, they passed George and Lacey instinctively tried covered up her bare chest and diaper. George, however, didn't even seem to notice that Lacey was topless. Once inside the downstairs bathroom, Ella helped Lacey up on the giant changing table. Lacey winced at the squishy sensation as she sat down on the wet diaper. "Now lie back and we'll get you washed and ready for bed." Lacey lay back. Lying on the changing table wearing nothing but a wet diaper felt weird and humiliating, almost like she was on display. She desperately wanted something to cover up with. While Ella undid the tapes and pulled off the diaper, she hummed a melody that was annoyingly familiar, but Lacey couldn't place it. The whole situation felt so awkward that Lacey just closed her eyes. She almost jumped when she felt a warm wetness on her crotch. What dash? Baby. Mommy just has to wash you so you don't get sore. The childish tone only made Lacey feel more awkward. Ella dried and powdered Lacey before quickly putting a new diaper on her. There we are. Doesn't that feel all better? She asked, giving Lacey's crotch a quick pat before helping her down from the changing table. The new diaper was much thicker than the one she had worn before. Lacey couldn't even bring her legs all the way together and had to waddle slightly when she walked. Why is it so much thicker than the other one? She asked. We wouldn't want any leaks at night, would we? I guess, Lacey admitted. Now, did you brush your teeth? Lacey only nodded in reply. She was still fascinated with the extra bulk between her legs. It felt very different from the extra thick towel diapers she had experimented with. Ella took Lacey's hand. Okay then, off to bed we go. Charlotte was standing in the doorway to one of the rooms when they came up the stairs. Like Lacey, she was also wearing nothing but a diaper. Well, hello there, little munchkin. Why aren't you in bed yet, and where's your nightdress? Ella asked. It's too hot, Charlotte said, looking down and biting the tip of her thumb. I guess you're right, Ella said. But hop in bed now. Okay, Charlotte chirped and ducked back inside. Ella and Lacey followed her. The room wasn't very big. There was a dresser by the wall opposite the door and a bed on either side. By the foot of each bed was a toy box. Everything was oversized and painted in cheery colors. Charlotte was already in the bed on the left. Ella tucked them both in and kissed them goodnight. It was years since Lacey had gone to bed this early, but for some reason she was so tired that it didn't take her more than a few minutes before she fell asleep. Lacey woke up from somebody shaking her shoulder. For a moment she looked around in the gloom, having forgotten where she was, then she saw who had woken her up. Charlotte was standing next to her bed, clutching a worn teddy bear to her chest with one arm. What is it, Charlotte? Can we sleep with you? Mr. Bear thinks it's scary when it's dark and windy. Okay, sure, Lacey mumbled and lifted the duvet. Charlotte crawled into bed and lay down next to her, snuggling close. Lacey pulled the duvet over them both and wrapped an arm protectively around Charlotte, who was already half asleep with her thumb in her mouth. When Lacey woke up, she was lying pressed against the wall. Charlotte was lying on her stomach, arms and legs spread as if she was skydiving, yet still managing to snore softly. Lacey caught a whiff of something and made the mistake of lifting the duvet. The smell that hit her nostrils made it quite clear what Charlotte had done. Lacey carefully made her way around Charlotte to get out of bed. She looked out of the window at the beautiful day outside. The sun was shining from a blue sky with only a few fluffy clouds. She opened the window to let in the fresh air. Or let out the smell. What had that girl been eating? Outside, the birds were singing. Lacey leaned on the windowsill and listened to the world waking up. Suddenly her crotch grew warm as she wet herself. Lacey was shocked. She hadn't noticed that she needed to pee until it was too late. Also, she didn't find wearing a wet diaper anywhere near as distasteful as she had the day before. This place is affecting me already. I have to get out of here. Charlotte stirred and stopped snoring, and Lacey walked over to the bed. She knelt next to it, taking care not to put weight on her diaper. Good morning, Charlotte, Lacey said, carefully brushing the hair out of Charlotte's face. Did Mr. Bear sleep well? She added. Morning. Charlotte started to roll over on her back, but Lacey stopped her. Can you keep a secret? Lacey asked quietly. Millimeter HM. Charlotte nodded. Me and Alistair are going on a treasure hunt today. Charlotte perked up. Can I come too? Of course you can, but we can't tell anybody. Especially Ella. Who? Mom, Lacey corrected. It'll be our secret. Just you and me and Alistair. Okay. So where is it? Where is what? The treasure. Oh. We don't know. Charlotte looked confused. That's why we're looking for it. I mean, it wouldn't really be a treasure hunt if we knew where it was, would it? Lacey added. The answer seemed to satisfy Charlotte. Come on, let's see if Mom is up so we can get you changed. Lacey helped Charlotte up and they headed downstairs. They were halfway down the stairs before Lacey realized that they were both wearing nothing but diapers. Wait here, Lacey said and darted back up the stairs as quickly as the swollen diaper and slightly too big steps would allow. She returned with a couple of nightdresses from the dresser, but Charlotte was already downstairs and headed for the kitchen. Lacey quickly pulled one of the dresses over her head and followed her. It was a little too small so she couldn't quite get it over the diaper, but didn't really care as long as her breasts were hidden. She didn't really want to run around topless even if nobody else seemed to care about that. Lacey followed Charlotte through the kitchen and out onto the porch. There, sitting on the porch swing in the morning sun was Ella. Morning Mama, Charlotte said and gave her a hug. Ella sniffed the air. Smells like one of you need a change. She looked at Lacey. Or maybe both of you. Ella got up from the swing and took Charlotte's hand. Come on Munchkin. Let's get you cleaned up. It took a while, but eventually Ella and Charlotte returned. Charlotte was wearing the same type of short dress as the day before, except it was pale yellow today, and her hair was back in pigtails. Lacey was next and in no time at all, she was washed and powdered. Ella held up 2 diapers for her. So, teddy bears, she wiggled one of the diapers. Or do you want the pretty flowers, she wiggled the other. Lacey decided it was probably best to play along to avoid raising suspicion. She pretended to think about it for a few moments and then she gave a little giggle and pointed at the diaper with the flower prints. Mom. Yes dear. Lacey wrinkled her nose. I don't like dresses. Can I have pants like Francine? Pretty please, she said, knowing that if she was going to be walking around the forest, she wanted pants and not a dress that would get caught on everything. Are you sure? You look so pretty in your dress yesterday. Millimeter HM. Lacey nodded. Well okay, but then you have to remember to let me know if you have to go poo-piss. Like now? Lacey asked, feigning innocence. Oh, you have to go now. Lacey nodded in reply and was quickly helped off the changing table and to the toilet. Sitting down and letting go felt better than in a long time. Still, Lacey was surprised at how little it bothered her to be doing this in front of someone who was essentially a stranger. This place is really getting to me. Minutes later, Lacey was washed, powdered, diapered and back in the kitchen. She was wearing overalls with colorful patches sewn on the bib and on one of the knees. Charlotte was sitting by the table drawing something. Lacey looked over her shoulder. In the middle of the paper was a house. What's that? It's a treasure map, of course. We can't go on a treasure hunt without a treasure map. Ah, of course, Lacey said. Why didn't I think of that? She sat down next to Charlotte and helped her with the map, drawing trees along the edges. Ella went back outside and for a while it was just the two of them. The house seemed almost cozy, even if it repeated the same day over and over. Stop that. Lacey shook her head to clear it. As the others waddled through the kitchen door, Ella got them changed and dressed and soon enough, it was time for breakfast. It had been ages since Lacey had oatmeal porridge for breakfast, but she had to admit that it was not only delicious, but also filling. By the time she was done, she felt as though she had a stomach full of concrete. Walking was almost a little uncomfortable. Ella sent all the children outside to play while she cleaned up. Francine and George found their boats and headed off for another round in their apparently eternal race. I still don't see why they can't come along, Lacey told Alistair as soon as they were out of earshot. Francine would rat us out in a heartbeat. We wouldn't be able to trust her. Yeah, she's a big, old, meanie Judyhead, Charlotte chimed in. And George? He seems like a nice enough guy. Alistair nodded. He is. But you didn't see him when he came here. As bad as this place is, I think he had it worse back home. Are you sure? Lacey still felt bad for leaving the two behind. As sure as I can be. Lacey sighed. Okay then. So it's just the three of us, she said and started up the hill she had come down only the day before. Once they reached the trees, Charlotte pulled out her map and started walking off to the left. Lacey had to stop her and point out that she was holding the map wrong every couple of minutes. As the walk deeper into the forest, twigs and branches began to get caught in their clothes and the ground changed. It was no longer the smooth dirt that was easy on their bare feet. All of a sudden, pebbles and prickly, dry grass appeared. I think we're on the right track, Alistair said. It's almost as if the forest doesn't want us to walk this way. Lacey agreed. Charlotte sat down on a big root. I don't want to do this anymore. It's no fun, she complained. What's in this treasure anyway? Lacey saw that they were about to lose Charlotte. She sat down next to her. You know how it's summer now, she said. Charlotte nodded. Don't you miss the winter? Snowmen, snow angels, hot chocolate. And Robin Mars. Charlotte said, her eyes lighting up. Yeah. And Robin Mars. That's what's in the treasure, winter. That seemed to be enough to motivate Charlotte, so they continued onwards. After quite a while and 2 tears in Charlotte's dress, they found the clearing. Lacey thought the shed in the middle looked a lot creepier now than it had yesterday. The treasure's in there? Charlotte asked nervously as she tried to hide behind Lacey. I think so. Lacey took a step forwards and all of a sudden the summer day didn't feel quite as nice and warm. There was a clammy chill in the air. I'm scared, Charlotte complained. I don't like this place. I want Mr. Bear. You can hold my hand, Charlotte, Lacey said and held out her hand. MK, she said, grabbing the hand, but still walking behind Lacey and Alistair. Lacey didn't need to look back to understand that while she was holding one hand, the thumb of the other hand was firmly in Charlotte's mouth. You know what, Charlotte, Lacey said, trying to sound cheerful. I think it's supposed to be scary. After all, it wouldn't be a real treasure hunt if it wasn't, would it? Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the door. Lacey pushed it open to reveal a brilliant golden light. Do you guys see that too? Lacey asked. Aha. What's that light? Charlotte wondered. Alistair took a step forward. Be careful, Lacey warned. We don't know if it'll work. Honestly, either way it'll be better than staying here, he said and walked into the light. Alistair. Lacey called after a few seconds, but there was no answer. The only sound was a steadily growing rumble behind them. Lacey glanced back over her shoulder and saw that the perfect blue sky was filled with dark clouds, and lightning flashing more and more frequently. Come on, Charlotte. We have to go too, Lacey said. But I'm scared. It's okay. I'll hold your hand all the way. And I promise I won't let go. They took another step closer. Lacey held her breath as they stepped across the threshold and into the light. For a brief moment there was the sensation of falling, and then nothing. A light woke Lacey up. She yawned and stretched, peering into the pre-dawn gloom to see the familiar things in her tiny apartment. Outside, the street light was swaying in the wind. Wow. That was a crazy dream. She untangled herself from the sheet and sat up. That's when she saw it. She wasn't wearing the towel diaper, but a big, puffy diaper with a cheerful flower print. And it was wet. Twin Torment for Timmy. It was June 1963, and my twin sister Tina was due home next Friday for the summer school holidays from the exclusive residential girls' school in Brighton that she attended, and my mother was running around like a scalded hen trying to organize things for her return. An additional thing to worry about this time was the party Mum had organized to celebrate Tina's homecoming. Tina had had a very good year at her school, and had been elected head prefect on top of her many other achievements, such as playing the piano in the school orchestra, finishing top in needlework, Latin and public speaking, just to name a few. So the homecoming party was as much to celebrate those things as it was to welcome Tina herself home. There was also the matter of her, and mine also, 16th birthday, which would come up at the end of July, so celebrations for Tina's return were widespread. You might think that I, the twin brother, might have become a little jealous of my twin sister's efforts, but that was not the case. We were still very fond of each other as we had been since we were toddlers, maybe helped on by that special bond that traditionally exists between twins. We were about as close to identical twins as a boy and girl can be, being the same height, about the same weight, same shoe size, and so on. However, as Tina and I were now approaching 16, clearly her shape and mine were starting to develop obvious differences which became more apparent every time she came home on vacation. Our family was comfortably off but certainly not rich, and we certainly couldn't have afforded the expensive fees that Tina's school normally charged. However, Tina had managed to win a valuable sponsored scholarship endowment from a former student who had gone on to great things in the fashion business. That scholarship just about met all the school's charges and fees. Me? Well, I battled on at the local high school, doing my best, but I was no great scholar, to be honest. I never finished any better than halfway in my class in our end-of-term exams, which was something of a contrast to Tina, who had regularly finished top in them. I sang in the school choir as a soprano, because my voice had not yet dropped. But my main claim to fame was some prowess at sport, especially cycling, having won a few junior events already. However, I really needed a new machine to keep up with the competition. My old racing bike was really starting to show its age, so I had my eye for a while on a new Claude Butler racing machine from Charlie's Cycles in the high street in town. Mum had been very fair and offered to match whatever I could save out of my meager wages from a weekly newspaper delivery job, but it was a slow job trying to reach the magic £25 that Mum would match to reach the £50 that the new bike would cost. Today was a Saturday and Mum wanted me to accompany her for some shopping that she had to do. I didn't really want to go until she mentioned that she especially wanted to drop in at Miss Fotheringali's frock salon north the high street. Now, why would I be interested in a visit to a frock salon? Well, it just happened that Charlie's Cycles was directly opposite, which meant I could drop in and have yet another close look at that racing bike I had long set my heart on. We didn't live all that far from town, so we walked the mile or so to the high street and Mum headed into the frock shop while I crossed the road to Charlie's Cycles. I didn't have much of a chance to look longingly at the bike of my dreams, because it was now 1 p.m. and the shop was closing. So I headed across the road to the frock shop to see what Mum was up to. It was also now about to close at 1 p.m., but the pretty young salesgirl let me in when I asked if my mother was still around in the shop. However, as soon as she let me in, she closed the door and turned the open sign around to read closed. No problem, I thought, that means Mum surely won't be very long now. I soon spotted Mum talking to a middle-aged lady, who was showing her some party frocks. The salesgirl who had let me in went up to them and pointed out my presents, which seemed to bring a smile to both Mum and the ladies' faces. What could they have in mind to be so pleased to see me all of a sudden, I wondered? Hello, Timmy, called out Mum. Come over and join us, will you please? I had no idea why I should be suddenly so welcome amongst all those party frocks, but I was soon to find out. Back in those days in the 60s, politeness was a necessity, so I found myself being introduced by my mother to the middle-aged lady who turned out to be nothing less than Miss Fotheringali herself, i.e., the boss of the frock shop. She was very nice to talk to, but I quickly twigged that there was something being planned between my mother and Miss F, in which I was going to play a part. But what could it be? Reality set in when my mother asked me to turn around while she was holding up a very pretty dark red party frock. I did as I was told, and felt the rustle of its satin material against my back. What the hell were they up to, I wondered. I soon found out, when Miss Fotheringay whispered to my mother that it appeared to be a perfect fit. A perfect fit? What the hell were they on about? I soon discovered what they had in mind, when my mother said, "Timmy, I need some help from you, but in return you would get another £5 towards your racing bicycle savings. Are you interested in doing a deal with me?" The whole deal sounded more than a little suspicious, because even at my tender age then, I had begun to realize that nothing was ever as clear as it might appear to be, especially where money was concerned. And that's exactly the way things had turned out. "Wow," I said to Mum, "that sounds a great proposition. I sure could do with another £5 to add to my Claude Butler bike fund. But what exactly would I have to do?" It was then that Miss Fotheringay stepped into the conversation. "Hello, Timmy," she said, with a sugary smile. "We haven't met before, but your mother has told me so much about you, including just how identical you and your twin sister, Tina, are in height and weight. We have both selected this lovely dark red frock as ideal for Tina to wear for her homecoming party, but we really need a model to try it on for size. Would you be happy to be our mannequin, please? All we need to do is a bit of a fine-tuning with your figure." I felt so embarrassed at this prospect, right there and then. I mean, much as I adored my twin sister, Tina, and was looking forward to her return next week, it was another matter entirely to be trying on party frocks for her. But what to do? Ideally needed more money for my bicycle fund, so after a few seconds of reflection, I agreed to be their model. "Okay," I said reluctantly. "Mum, I really could do with another £5 for my bike fund, as you know. So what exactly do I need to do, then?" The two of them then fussed and fidgeted all over me for several minutes, measuring my chest, waist and hips. That was followed by lots of whispering and giggling, before Mum finally came right out and said that I would need to have a bit of figure alteration if the frock fitting was to go ahead properly. I didn't quite know what she had in mind, being more concerned with the prospect of getting that additional £5 for my bike fund. If I had known then what was to happen, I'd have rushed out of the store door, but in hindsight it was now locked and I'd have got nowhere fast had I decided to make a run for it. So all I could do was follow Miss Fotheringay into a change room and progressively get fitted with a control brief, padded panties and a lacy pink training bra after I had stripped down to my underpants. My humiliation went from bad to worse, but all I could keep thinking of was the £5 that I would get for putting up with all this. One other point of salvation was that the shop was closed, so there was only Mum, me and Miss Fotheringay along with the junior saleslady who had let me in. If there had been other ladies coming into and out of the store that would have seen me, I think I would have died of embarrassment. Mum had Tina's measurements recorded, and as I progressively was fitted with the padded bra, briefs and padded panties, both she and Miss Fotheringay let out more sounds of excitement as they measured me up and found I was getting closer and closer to Tina's vital statistics. However, although my chest was a 32B just like Tina's, courtesy of a bit of help from some booster pads inserted under my training bra, and my hips were now 34s just like hers thanks to the padded panties, I had a problem with my waist which still wasn't as slim as hers. What to do? The ladies thought for a while and then decided the only thing was for me to wear an old-fashioned high-waist girdle, in order to get that final 3 inches from my waist. I was soon to find out just how tight one of those girdles can be. Although Miss Fotheringay's salon was basically there to stock frocks and accessories, she also had a small corsetry and hosiery department. She went searching into the corsetry area and soon came back with a heavyweight item with boning which I would have to step into, with hooks and eyes plus a long zipper that had to be fastened. "Timmy, you're lucky that I've got just one of these in a small size, because usually they're for larger sized, more mature ladies who've put on a bit of weight and need some firm control." All the time the ladies were fixing the girdle onto me, I was told to keep breathing in. There were all those small hooks and eyes that had to be connected before it could finally be zipped up via that long zipper on the left side. I then found I could hardly breathe out again because it was so tight. I soon realized this was one really mean and uncomfortable item of feminine underwear. Miss Fotheringay measured my waist, and finally she and Mum were happy as the tape measure now read the magic figure of 24 inches. So, I at last had exactly the same measurements for my chest, waist and hips as my twin sister Tina. Now that I actually met Tina's measurements, it was time to try on the dark red party frock that Mum admired so much. It was really a very pretty garment, and if I hadn't been in so much discomfort from that tight girdle, I might have secretly enjoyed the experience of wearing it more than I did. It actually wasn't that difficult to get into, just stepping into it and having Mum fasten it up at the back. Thanks to all the various female undergarments I was now wearing, everything fitted perfectly. The last thing was to put on some lacy white petticoats to get the correct effect on the frock's hemline. My chest jutted out in front, my now narrow waist fitted the confines of the frock, and my hips widened out just right for the cut of the frock. Mum and Miss Fotheringay oohed and ahed about how perfect I looked. Of course, it wouldn't have been all over without me having to walk up and down, sashaying around to show how well the frock fitted me. That was when the two of them decided I really needed to wear some nylons and a pair of heeled shoes, because that was what Tina would need for the party, and also they were worried that the girdle would begin to ride up around my hips if I did not wear nylons with it. Unfortunately, the nylons proved to a bit of a problem because my feet and legs were apparently an unusual size combination, and the only ones that were the right size were 15 Denia Casa brand, fully fashioned, ones in dark tan. I think I could have managed to put on a pair of seam-free stockings on my own, but it proved beyond me to get those seamed stockings on correctly. It didn't help either that the girdle I was wearing was so tight and firm, making it difficult to lean over to put the nylons on over my feet. So Mum came to my rescue, and slid one stocking on over each of my feet. I then had to stand up, lifting up my lacy petticoats while Mum pulled the stockings up my legs, and Miss Fotheringay made sure the back seams were perfectly straight before they attached the suspenders to the tops of the stockings. The girdle had 3 suspenders for each leg, so there were 6 of them to do up in all. Without Mum, I don't think I could have managed to get them with the seams even remotely straight, and I wondered just how mature ladies in similar tight girdles got on with putting their nylons on every day. I guess that it was all a matter of experience, getting things just right. Now that I had the stockings on and the back seams past inspection, it was a matter of finding a pair of black court shoes with low heels, seeing I was a novice at walking in ladies' shoes. Miss Fotheringay rescued a pair with shiny steel bows on the front from a mannequin model which fitted me perfectly, but although the heels were barely 2 inches high, I had the devil of a job getting used to walking in them. The problem was that because of the effect of the lacy petticoats pushing the hem of the frock outwards, I couldn't actually see my feet, so I was kind of walking blind in them. One other problem was that they felt tight around the front, but the ladies told me that was the way women's shoes were meant to fit when worn with nylons. If they weren't a tight fit, there was a good chance the shoe could fall off at some awkward moment and cause some disaster, like laddering those expensive and delicate nylon stockings. The salon had a small sort of catwalk, which I had to walk up and down several times with both Mum and Miss Fotheringay watching my every move. It was really quite embarrassing, especially with the lacy petticoats continually rustling as I walked up and down. However, despite my problems with the shoes, they were both very happy with the way I looked in Tina's party frock. Mum then told me go and sit down and rest my feet while she and Miss F sorted out the finances in her office. I cannot tell you just how happy I was to finally get to sit down. So there I was in the waiting room, resting my aching feet and trying to ignore the harsh clamp of the girdle around my waist. Strangely, I had already got used to the twin mounds on my chest and the rustle of the nylons and petticoats I was wearing. Mum came out of the office wearing a big smile and sat down next to me. "Timmy," she said, "you look so perfect in Tina's party frock that I want to make another proposition to you. I've already agreed to pay you a $5 for what you've done so far, as you know. Would you be agreeable to another $5 for another bit of modeling this afternoon?" It would make a whole tenner to add to your bike fund. While she'd been away talking to Miss Fotheringham, I had been doing a bit of mental math and realised I was now getting close to the magic £50 I needed to get the bike of my dreams. However, what did Mum have in mind to be offering another £5? The answer was soon supplied. What Mum had in mind was that I should walk home with her wearing Tina's frock, along with the heels, nylons, petticoats and such, calling in at Auntie Joan's house en route. The reason for this might appear a little obscure, but Auntie Joan was Mum's elder sister and the two of them just didn't get on from way back. It wasn't all that far away from our house to detour via Auntie's place, so clearly Mum had some plan to show me off as my sister Tina all frocked and frilled up as some kind of joke. Was it worth that additional £5 though? I then had some awful premonitions of not being able to complete the walk back from Auntie's house because of the strain on my feet, and having to wait at the bus stop while taking a rest. Getting wolf whistles from the local teenage louts was also in the back of my mind. However, I thought about it hard for a minute or so, and decided it was worth that risk to get that additional £5 for my bicycle savings. Auntie Joan was both notoriously short-sighted and deaf and, with a bit of luck, wouldn't spot that I wasn't really Tina at all. Maybe after a sit-down on her sofa and a cup of tea, I might be refreshed sufficiently to be able to walk back home with Mum still dressed in Tina's party frock, stockings, and so on. However, although I might have looked like my twin sister Tina in some respects, my face still looked just like the Timmy I really was. So I had said, "Mum, do you realise I just won't look like Tina at all, unless I wear a wig and some makeup to disguise me? I know Auntie is a bit short-sighted, but even she will work out that it's Timmy and not Tina in the red frock." "Ah, yes," said Mum in one of her knows-all tones of voice. Miss Fotheringham and I had been discussing that aspect in her office. "She can find a nice wig for you to wear and get Tracy, her assistant, to put some makeup on your face. It'll only take a few minutes." So, barely 10 minutes later, I was leaving the frock salon with Mum, now wearing a brunette wig, lipstick, mascara, rouge and powder. The wig came off one of the mannequin models and it was actually a bit big for me, so Miss Fotheringham found a sort of tight skullcap thing that fitted over my head, to which the inside of the wig was pinned securely. I had been most wary about how I would look, but once I had seen myself in the mirror of the change room, I was totally convinced nobody, especially short-sighted Auntie Joan, would detect that I really wasn't her favourite niece, Tina, home early from her boarding school. I really looked so perfect it just wasn't true, but could I manage to walk all that distance in Tina's frock, along with heels and all the other stuff? Walking up and down on the catwalk in the frock salon had been dead easy in comparison. However, outside it was quite a breezy sort of day and the red frock and lacy petticoats seemed determined to be blown upwards by each gust of wind. Mum told me to keep my right arm down by my side, to prevent any unfortunate display of my stockings and underwear courtesy of the breeze. I'd have liked to have kept both my left and right arms down by my sides to prevent such occurrences, but my left arm was already committed to carrying the black handbag which Mum had chosen to complement my patent black leather low-heeled court shoes. We had to cross the main road and walk past the cycle shop opposite, and I stole a lingering glance at that racing bike in the window that I dearly would love to own. Somehow seeing it again and knowing that it was getting closer to becoming mine, courtesy of the feminine frock and undies I was wearing right then, made me more resolute in getting this visit to Aunt Joan's over and done with. My black shoes had metal tips on the heels and gave that characteristic click, clack sound that I had heard so often from ladies out walking, but now the shoe was literally on the other foot, mine. Mum and I continued our walk up the other side of the high street, before turning off at Coronation Drive, which was where Auntie Joan lived. However, just as we turned off, an even bigger gust of wind came up and, despite my best efforts, the hem of Tina's frock blew up, along with the lacy petticoats. As bad luck would have it, several teenage guys were walking along the other side of the road at exactly that moment, and gave loud wolf whistles as they saw my stocking tops and underwear on full display. I could have died, there and then, but what to do? Mum just whispered, "Ignore them, Timmy. Just keep walking." Now you know what we ladies have to put up with all the time from you men. So we turned off into Coronation Drive and I was so glad to see Auntie Joan's terraced house not far away on the left side. My feet and ankles were really starting to hurt from the unfamiliar walking in heeled shoes they'd been subjected to for about 20 minutes. I was hoping to get this charade over just as soon as I could, not only to earn myself the additional £5 from Mum towards my bicycle fund, but to finally get out of those high heel shoes, bra, girdle, frock and so on. Masquerading as my twin sister Tina was fast losing any attraction it might have once held. Knocking at Auntie Joan's door, Mum gave me a big encouraging smile as we neared Auntie Joan's house, and knocked on the door. "You've done very well so far, Timmy," she said with a smile. "Just keep things going, and that extra £5 will be all yours. I really want to see if we can fool that stupid elder sister of mine into believing that you are actually your twin sister Tina." The wily ways of women had long been a total mystery to me. So just why my mother should want to fool her elder sister Joan that I was actually my twin sister Tina, was yet another of those mysteries. However, I didn't have very long to consider the problem because the front door soon opened and there was Auntie Joan, complete with her Coke bottle, spectacles and hearing aid, as usual. My mother quickly greeted her and they embraced as if they hadn't met for some months, although I knew they'd got together for tea and biscuits only the previous week. "You haven't met my lovely daughter Tina for a while, have you?" said Mum, keeping a straight face as she smiled at me. "Why, no," said Auntie Joan. "Give me a big kiss, Tina. My, what a pretty girl you are. It seems like only yesterday that you were running around with that twin brother of yours, Timmy, in shorts. Yet here you are now, looking so beautiful in that pretty dress. My, I see you're wearing heels and stockings too." What could I do but return her sloppy kiss and follow my mother into the hallway and then the lounge? So far, so good, I thought. Auntie Joan clearly thought I was my twin sister Tina, and my extra £5 was looking good. However, could I keep the deception up? I followed my mother into the lounge and managed to sit down in my best feminine manner, i.e., without sprawling and showing my petticoats and underwear. It was actually a great relief to finally get to sit down and rest my feet, because the shoes I had been walking in for some 20 minutes were really starting to pinch my toes. Even worse were the restrictive confines of the girdle. However, at least I had now gotten used to having the unusual effect of wearing a padded bra, not to mention the continual rustle of the Lacey petticoats under Tina's party frock. The nylons I was wearing didn't seem to be a problem, either. How long could I keep this charade going, though? All I had to do was sit there looking pretty with my knees crossed, and let my mother do all the talking, or so I thought. 8. An early birthday present. Mum and Auntie Joan chatted about this and that while I sat there looking as demure as I could. However, Auntie had been looking at my shoes and suddenly said, "Tina, that frock really looks so pretty on you. I see you're beginning to fill out nicely up top, too. However, those shoes really need to be a bit more fashionable to match the rest of your outfit. Can I just have a look at one of your shoes, please?" Well, I could hardly refuse, could I? So I carefully took off my left shoe and handed it to her. She examined it and soon found that it was a size 6B. "Have you ever tried wearing higher heels yet, Tina?" she asked me. No, Auntie," I replied. She said and went out of the lounge, leaving me in wonder at what was going to come next. I glanced at my mother, who just shrugged her shoulders. Shortly, Auntie Joan reappeared carrying what looked like a small showbox, which was exactly what it turned out to be, seeing it contained a pair of new-looking black patent court shoes, with pointed toes and heels almost 4 inches high. "Now, Tina," said Auntie, "you want to look a bit more grown up, don't you? Try these high heels on and see the difference they'll make to your pretty outfit. I only ever wore them once and they were a bit too tight for me, but you've got smaller feet than me and they should fit you perfectly." The shoes did indeed look very fashionable and glamorous, but as I'd been having trouble walking in mere 2-inch heeled shoes, how would I manage those towering high heels? However, what could I do but not try them on there and then, without seeming churlish? Secretly, I was hoping they would not fit my feet, but they turned out to be so perfect a fit on my feet that I felt like Cinderella being fitted with the slippers in that folk story. In fact, they were actually slightly wider at the front than the shoes I'd been fitted with at the shop, so they didn't pinch at all. However, trying to walk in 4-inch stilettos would surely prove another matter altogether. Standing up in the high heels seemed easy enough, although I noticed now that I was taller than Mum and about the same height as Auntie Joan. Strange how just a pair of shoes can change everything, I thought. Well, said Mum, let's see how you get on walking in them, Tina. So I took a couple of cautious steps forward, fully expecting to fall flat on my face, or worse, my bottom, and end up revealing my frilly petticoats and stockings. However, it actually seemed easier than I thought it would be, so I took a few more steps before trying to turn around as gracefully as I could. Now that did prove to be almost my undoing, as I nearly lost my balance and had to hold on to the side of the nearby sofa. Oops! I said as demurely as I could, almost went over there for a moment. Don't worry, said Auntie. I think every girl in the world had exactly the same experience as you just did the first time she wore high heels and tried to do a 360-degree turn while wearing a flouncy frock and petticoats. Yes, added my mother, I can recall doing the same thing myself the first time I wore heels. It's all a matter of practice, Tina, like everything else. Now say a big thank you to Auntie Joan for the lovely shoes. They really do look that much nicer to complement your outfit than those flatter ones. Thank you so much, Auntie, I cooed. However, I was secretly wondering just how the hell I was going to walk home in those towering heels, when I could barely turn around in Auntie's lounge without grabbing hold of the furniture. At least the flatties I had worn were relatively easy to walk in, despite being a bit tight at the front. These very glamorous-looking court shoes were nicer to wear, but there was no way I could see myself managing to walk over a mile in them, while trying to hang onto my flouncy frock in the breeze. However, things took a turn for the better when Auntie said, "How's that twin brother of yours doing, Tina? He's such a polite boy and so well behaved. By the way, aren't you two having a birthday shortly?" "Yes, Auntie," I replied. "We'll both be turning 16 very soon now." "Well," she said, "consider those pretty high heels you're wearing as your birthday present, slightly early, Tina. However, I haven't anything by way of a present to give your brother Timmy." So she got her purse out of her handbag and gave a couple of pound notes to my mother. "Here, get Timmy something you know he specially wants." Mum smiled at me and said, "Thanks, Joan, I think I know just the thing that Timmy will appreciate." So it appeared my bicycle fund had gained an unexpected couple of pounds more, on top of the tenner I would be getting for doing the modelling gig as my twin sister Tina. Perhaps the whole modelling masquerade was really worth all the effort and humiliation after all. However, there was still the problem of how I was going to manage to walk home over a mile in Auntie's high heels, but that also was solved when Auntie Joan offered to drop us off at home, seeing as she was about to drive to Guildford to see some friends. Mum and I were indeed both grateful, with me even more so. The prospect of wobbling along the pavement for a mile or so in those stilettos while hanging on to my frock to stop the breeze blowing it upwards, was now solved. Fate moves in mysterious ways sometimes. I get more wolf whistles. Mum, Auntie Joan, and I headed out through the front door and up the garden path, which I managed to navigate without any disaster. The high heels had steel tips which made a disconcerting click, clack as I made my way slowly up the path towards Auntie's small Ford which was parked on the road. However, to be honest, it was actually easier to walk on a hard surface like the pathway in those high heels, than it had been walking on the soft carpet of Auntie's lounge when I first tried them on and almost fell over trying to turn around. Mum got to the garden gate first and opened it for me and Auntie to pass through. I waited for Mum on the footpath, trying to look as unconcerned as I could, because there were two teenage boys walking towards us. As they got closer, I avoided any eye contact and tried my best to look like Audrey Hepburn staring at an imaginary shop window at Tiffany's. It didn't achieve its aim though, because there was a shrill wolf whistle from one of the teenagers followed by, "Hello, gorgeous, How about a date tonight then? I kept starting into space and hoped they'd go away, which luckily they did. Mum helped by glaring at them, too. Auntie Joan had by now opened the car doors and it was time to test my newfound feminine skills by getting into the back of the car without revealing anything unladylike. Believe me, it's not as easy as you might think, especially when you're wearing high-heel shoes. I think I managed it okay, by sitting down sideways and then shifting my feet across, all the time holding my red frock down from billowing up. Those two louts had stopped to watch my performance at getting into a small car without revealing my stocking tops or other feminine fripperies, and I guess they were a bit disappointed at not seeing anything other than maybe a quick flash of my nylon thighs as I shifted my feet across into the car. "Well done, Tina," said Mum in an encouraging voice. We drove up to the top of the road into the high street and I couldn't help but stare into the window of the cycle shop as we went past. Things had taken a definite turn for the better with my savings for the Claude Butler racing bike, thanks to my modeling for Tina that day. I had also learnt how to walk in high heels and get into the back of a car in a flouncy frock, so it had been quite a learning experience one way or the other. I couldn't imagine my newfound skills would ever be called on again, but Auntie had said to Mum as they watched me take my first hesitant steps in her lounge, that once you've learned to walk in heels, you never forget the knack. We were soon outside our house, and it was time for me to try the reverse procedure of getting out of a small car without revealing too much, and not falling over once I took my first steps up our path. 10. Home again at last. We turned and waved goodbye to Auntie Joan, and, as I turned back to walk back up the path to the front door, I realized I had managed to turn both times in Auntie's high heels without any problem. Mum followed me up the path and opened the door. We were home at last and my modeling adventure was over. However, there was the small matter of first sitting down with Mum to discuss the results of my afternoon's modeling in Tina's party frock. "I was really pleased with your efforts, Timmy," said Mum. "Not a lot of boys of your age would have done what you did today, what with perhaps being called a sissy if they'd been found out. But those two louts who wolf whistled at you as we were waiting to get into Joan's car were totally fooled, weren't they? You did really well to learn to walk in her black high heels so quickly. When you almost fell over in her lounge after you first tried her shoes on, I thought you had bitten off a bit more than you could chew, but you quickly got used to them and I have to admit, they really looked glamorous on you. Of course, now we have to think of your sister Tina wearing them, don't we? I don't think you would want to be claiming them for your own in future, would you?" I had to agree. However, it was now time to get out of Tina's frock and all the other feminine finery. I got out of Auntie Joan's high heels without any trouble, but I needed Mum's help with the zip at the back of the red party frock. Getting out of a frock is actually more difficult than getting into it, I soon found. Gravity now works against rather than for you. But with some help from Mum, the pretty red frock I had been wearing for several hours was lifted up over my shoulders, and I was now left in my bra, girdle, stockings and, of course, the Lacey petticoats. I just stepped out of the petticoats and Mum undid the pink bra for me. "Just sit down, Timmy," said Mum. "I'll undo your nylons for you, because you wouldn't want to lather them. I'm sure Tina will be wearing them too when she gets home at the end of the week." So Mum carefully undid the front suspenders on my girdle and I moved left and then right so she could unhitch the side and rear ones. "You've done really well, Timmy," said Mum. "Wearing such sheer stockings for the first time is not easy. I think I laddered my first pair within barely an hour, when I first tried wearing them. But yours are still perfect." Mum carefully folded my nylons up and put them to the side and then it was just a matter of unzipping the girdle and its hooks and eyes, and finally I was out of it. I think the worst single thing I had had to put up with that afternoon was that girdle. Wearing it had been progressively sheer hell. I had overheard Mum and other ladies talking in the past about their problems with girdles, but now I had found out for myself just what they had been talking about. If I ever heard another lady whispering about her girdle killing her, I would know only too well from my personal experience just what she was talking about. Finally, I was just left with the padded panties, and they came down very easily to leave me wearing my own briefs only. I was finally free of all that feminine frippery, and could get dressed in my own clothes again. "What are you going to do with all the underclothes and those shoes Miss Fotheringham got for me to put on, Mum?" I asked. "Surely Tina won't be needing to wear those padded bra and briefs and tight girdle, will she?" "No, she won't," replied Mum. "Maybe you could pop them into Miss Fotheringham's shop one afternoon for me, would you?" "Okay, Mum," I replied. "What about the shoes, too?" Mum thought for a bit and then said, "Well, Tina is old enough now to be wearing high heels, and if you could manage wearing them, then she should also be able to without any problems. So I'll package up these low-heeled ones and they can go back to the shop too. We'll just have to hope that Tina is as good walking in her first high heels as you were today, Timmy." Discussions then moved on to the amount of money I now had compiled towards my new racing bike, which Mum was holding on my behalf. Clearly today's modelling had increased the total quite a bit, but I was still short by a small amount of the almost £50 that the Claude Butler bike cost. However, I got paid on Fridays for my newspaper delivery round, and I reckoned that additional 30 shillings would just be enough to make that magic 50 quid. And so it turned out. On Friday, I got my weekly wages from the newsagents at just after 4 p.m. Of course, I had to return the package of the now unwanted frillis and the shoes into Miss Fotheringham's salon, but that only took a minute. I certainly wasn't going to hang around there, just in case they needed me for some more modelling duties. I then rushed down the high street to Charlie's Cycles to pay the money for the bicycle of my dreams, having already been given the rest of it from my cycle savings fund by Mum. I rode the new bike back home as quickly as I could, avoiding the temptation to go via the local hill for a bit of showing off. Besides, it looked like it was going to rain. At 7:15 p.m, Tina was due in on the train from London at our local station, and both Mum and I were there to greet her. I carried her bags to a taxi and we headed home. She was looking a bit tired but even more pretty than ever. "I'm so glad to see you all again," said Tina. "Has anything interesting been going on while I've been away, Timmy?" "Not really," I answered. "Oh, yes, I've finally got myself another bicycle." Dresses worn over bouffant petticoats were called poofy, not puffy, by women. A dress or skirt with enough petticoats under it was said to have lots of poof. It was definitely the fashion from spring 1953 to approximately 1960 for women, and for girls, from toddler, little and preteen girls, right up to their post-pubescent years. Sears Roebuck and Company, with its stores in many cities of the USA and Canada, continued to sell bouffant slips for preteen girls until 1966. New dress shops selling the bouffant style of dresses and skirts proliferated during this petticoat era, offering not only dresses, skirts and lingerie for women and older girls, but also panties, petticoats and pretty bouffant slips and dresses for little and preteen girls. Poofy, a fashion designer's term, also used by women, means the same as bouffant. Petticoated, or petticoating, dressing and raising a little boy like a little girl. Nylon tricot, pronounced nylon tricot, a relatively new and inexpensive smooth, shiny, nylon fabric invented in the late 1940s, having a silky feel and appearance. Short puffed sleeves, a lot of the dresses for little girls during this time had cute short puffed sleeves, usually trimmed with plain white binding, occasionally lace trimmed. Rumba panties, panties for little girls having side-to-side horizontal rows of ruffled white lace across the back of them as well as lace around the leg openings. Regular panties for girls and women had lace trim around the leg openings, often in narrow panels of semi-transparent pleated lace just above the front of the leg openings. Full dresses, and skirts, made at this time to be worn with petticoats, had voluminous skirts called full, usually with 8 or more gauze, the woven or sewn together widening folds of material making a dress's skirts. Spaghetti straps, not real spaghetti of course, but narrow soft straps often made of velvet to hold up the bodice of a woman's sleeveless dress or gown. Secretary collar, the collar on most of the dresses for little girls and some dresses for women having little round front ends or lapels. The name is due to office secretaries often wearing dresses with this type of neat little collar, not to be confused with the Peter Pan collar that had longer pointed front ends. Mother and daughter dresses that look the same, but in appropriate sizes for a mother and her little girl, a favorite of mothers during the bouffant style years. Boat neckline. A dress without a collar, having shoulder straps and a straight top to the lower bodice across the chest, generally worn during the warmer months. For some reason that neither sociologists nor psychologists have never been able to figure out, a lot of women began dressing their little boys like girls during this time. It either unintentionally or deliberately turned normal boys into sissies, a possible reason simply being that they thought it was cute, though sometimes it was done as a form of punishment for naughty boys until they were older, the women apparently thinking it would improve their behavior when they became teenagers. Timmy becomes Tammy. I remember it very well, and with a longing sigh for an earlier style. It was the beginning of that pretty time, spring 1953. The new bouffant fashion of women wearing petticoats under their full dresses, and little girls wearing bouffant full slips under their dresses had become the new style decreed by the fashion designers of Paris, France earlier that spring. It was quickly adopted throughout the rest of Western Europe, including the UK, and in America, Canada, and by women in other modern countries, especially any country with a wealthy and or middle class in its population, such as Argentina, Venezuela, South Africa, Australia, and eventually, Japan. Timmy, a cute little 7-year-old boy, had gone to live with his aunt in a town in Westchester County, New York after his parents had died in a tragic car accident. 2 women, June McKay, Timmy's aunt, a young widow and grammar school teacher before her marriage, and her closest and dearest friend Barbara Cummings, a divorcee, were sitting on June's living room couch as they had tea and chatted on a Friday afternoon. "I have to do something about Timmy," said June. "The rest of the boys in the neighborhood are all a lot older than he is, and they don't want a 7-year-old boy tagging along with them. He's lonely and sort of sad now with nobody to play with." "That's a shame, June," said Barbara. "Timmy's such a nice little boy." "Of course if he was a little girl he'd have plenty of little friends to play with," said June. "There's lots of little girls his age living near us. I've been thinking about doing something that would solve the problem, but I wanted to hear your opinion on the idea first. I'd appreciate any help you could give me, if you don't object to the idea." "What do you have in mind?" asked Barbara. "Well," replied June with a little sigh, "I've seen him looking at the pictures of panties, bouffant slips and dresses for girls in the Sears Roebuck catalog several times," explained June. "He may have been just curious, but he could be a sissy. But even if he isn't a sissy yet, if I was to dress him as my little niece, he'd be able to play with the little girls in our neighborhood. The little girls living near us must outnumber the boys by at least 3 to 1. "That's a fun idea," said Barbara. "Such a cute little boy like Timmy really would look like a little girl once he was wearing a dress and things. I can imagine how darling he'd look playing hopscotch with the girls, his little dress and bouffant slip bouncing up and down. When are you going to start? I'd love to go along when you go shopping for him." "Thanks, Barbara," said June. "This'll be a first-time experience for me to be shopping for dresses for a little boy." "June, how come his hair is so long?" asked Barbara. "To be truthful," explained June, "I've been thinking of doing this since last year, so I didn't get him any haircuts. I still have my teacher's certificate, and this past school year I gave him homeschooling. We might as well get started today. I'll bring him inside and see if he's still clean enough. I gave him a bubble bath this morning and shampooed his hair. But first I want to change my dress before we go shopping. I'll be back in a few minutes. When June came back into the living room, she was wearing a lovely white sleeveless dress with black velvet spaghetti straps holding it up, its bodice and skirts covered with tiny black polka dots and a sprinkling of dainty black velvet bows on its skirts, wore 3 white petticoats under it to poof it out nice, long over their elbow. White gloves, and carried a black velvet-covered clutch purse to go with her dress. "June, that's such a gorgeous dress," said Barbara. "Thanks, Barbara. I save it for special occasions," replied June, "and buying dresses for a sissy certainly is one." Timmy passed inspection as far as still being nice and clean, and with the 2 women got into June's new Bic and headed downtown, Timmy sitting in the front seat between the 2 women, their full dresses and petticoats spilling over across his legs. "Timmy," began June, "today we're going to do something you'll like. You're going to become my pretty little girl. Won't that be nice?" "Gee, Auntie," asked Timmy, "can I be a girl?" "Yes, sweetheart," said his aunt. "You just have to wear dresses and the other pretty things little girls wear and learn how to behave like a good little girl. Don't be afraid, Timmy. I think you're going to like being my little girl and having fun playing with other little girls." "Yes, yes, Auntie," replied Timmy eagerly with a happy smile. Barbara and June looked at each other with knowing smiles. It seemed to both women that if Timmy wasn't already a sissy, he certainly didn't mind June's plans to make him one. All that was left to do was to dress him like June's little niece as soon as they took him into one of the store's dressing rooms, and getting his hair done in a little girl's style afterwards. June had phoned before they left and asked for an appointment for Timmy at Francine's, a salon or beauty parlor owned by a good friend of hers, Francine Bissett. Timmy was lucky. When June had called Francine, she'd learned that it was a slow day at her salon, and she'd be able to fit Timmy in any time during the afternoon. As they drove downtown, June decided to go to Feinberg's, a department store that carried a pretty line of clothes for women and girls. The idea of dressing a little boy like a girl made June and Barbara eager to start, and was obviously devilishly fun for the 2 women. June found a space in the store's parking lot, then held Timmy by the hand as they entered the store and got on the elevator. When it reached the 2nd floor, they got off and walked through the women's department into the girls' department. "June, where should we start?" asked Barbara. "Panties first," replied June. "We'll start from the inside and work outward." A pleasant-looking middle-aged saleslady with a tape measure hanging around her neck came over to them. "My name is Marcia. Can I help you?" she asked. "Yes," said June. "My little nephew is going to be my little niece, so there's a lot of things we have to get for him. Could you show us some panties for him, please?" "What a lucky little boy he is," said Marcia with a nice smile at Timmy. "I'll take his measurements first, including his shoe size, and you can begin picking out whatever you want for him. I'll be glad to help you if you have any questions. I have 3 darling little granddaughters about his age." Marcia quickly took Timmy's measurements, writing his sizes on a pad, and gave them to June. June and Barbara picked out some pretty lace-trimmed nylon tricot romper panties for a little girl in Timmy's size. She also picked out some regular nylon tricot panties in different pastel colors with white lace trim just around the leg openings, and then moved on to 3 long racks of bouffant slips for girls. Marcia showed them where the size 7 bouffant slips were, and June and Barbara began picking out some for Timmy. Eventually they decided on 3 pink ones with nylon parchment overskirts, pretty white lace at each widening tier and along its bottom edge, with 3 inner layers of pink nylon horsehair netting, also trimmed with white lace, and 3 white slips lace decorated in the same way. The innermost layer of nylon netting was lined with nylon tricot so it wouldn't be scratchy on a little girl's legs. At this point June had already begun to regard Timmy as her little girl. "I just love the new bouffant style," said Barbara. "It's so pretty and feminine. Yes. It's the prettiest style since the Edwardian long dresses that had a short train and bustle, agreed June. Let's pick out some dresses for my little girl now. She smiled down at Timmy. Timmy was still smiling too. It took a half hour before the two women had picked out 8 pretty dresses for Timmy. June also bought a cute pink poodle skirt and 3 white button-back blouses with little flowers embroidered on their bodices. Then Marcia showed them the shoes and socks for little girls. June bought some shiny black patent leather Mary Janes for Timmy, along with a pair of shiny white patent leather shoes, also having a strap and buckle like his black Mary Janes. Next they got some ankle socks in pastel colors to match his dresses and some white ones with tiny pastel-colored flowers on them. By the way, suggested Marcia, we have some pretty mother and daughter dresses. Would you like to see them? Yes, said June. I think my little niece will like wearing a dress like her auntie's dress. And I'll be setting a good example for her when we wear them together. Marcia led them to a separate rack of the dresses, and June picked out a set in lilac and white checks, a pink gingham set, and a set in red with little white polka dots. Come on, Barbara, said June. I think I've got everything for now. June, what about a little pocketbook and some white cotton gloves? Asked Barbara. Every little girl should have her cute little accessories. Oh yes. You're right, answered June. But first let's get my little girl dressed up pretty. Leaving the other dresses and things on the counter where the cash register was, June took the pink gingham set of dresses, lacy pink romper panties and a white bouffant slip for little girls with her as she brought Timmy into one of the dressing rooms. Barbara stood at the entrance to their dressing room, holding Timmy's new ankle socks and shoes. Inside the dressing room, June helped Timmy take off all his clothes. Then she held open the romper panties. Timmy stepped into them and June drew the elastic band up to his waist. Now for your poofy slip, sweetheart, said June. This is the kind of petticoat all little girls wear. You'll be wearing petticoats now, just like big girls and ladies and do. She lifted the white bouffant slip over his head, telling him to put his hands up high. The layers of the slip came down over him with a little tugging, the adjustable straps settling on his shoulders. A pink ribbon bow with long dangly tag ends was on the outermost layer of his bouffant slip, with a small pink bow at the top center of its lacy bodice. Barbara stood at the entrance to the dressing room, wondering just how cute a little girl Timmy would look like when he was all dressed up pretty and had his hair done at Francine's salon. Next came his dress. It was Timmy's part of the pink gingham set of the mother and daughter dresses. June told him to put his hands up high again and brought the little dress down over his head, making sure his hands and arms went into the short puffed sleeves, then gently turned him around, buttoned up the back of it, and tied the white sash in a big pretty bow at the back of his waist. The last items were pink ankle socks and the white strap and buckle shoes to match the colors of his gingham dress. Now I'll put on my new dress, too, sweetheart, said June, and changed into her part of the mother and daughter dresses, still wearing her own 3 white petticoats under it. They emerged from the dressing room, and June held Timmy's hand and led him to a tall 3-sided mirror, and stood in back of him as they looked at themselves. She had dropped Timmy's boys' clothes and sneakers in a rubbish barrel along the way to the mirror. A big smile came onto Timmy's cute face as he looked at their reflection in the mirror. See how pretty you look now, sweetheart, asked June, with a satisfied smile over Timmy's appearance in his little dress. Yes, Auntie, said the still smiling Timmy. My dress looks like your dress, Auntie. Oh, June, said Barbara. He really does look like a little girl already. I can hardly wait to see how cute he'll look once Francine finishes working on his hair. Yes, Timmy, explained June. We're going to go to a place now where a nice lady will make your hair look like other little girls' hair. Then you'll be my pretty little girl. Lastly, June got a little shiny white patent leather pocketbook with a shoulder strap, and a pair of little white cotton gloves for Timmy, and put both items on him. Sweetheart, just rest your left hand on top of it to keep it from swinging around when you're walking, instructed June. Here's a $1 for being a good little girl today. Timmy opened his little pocketbook and put the big coin in it. "Thank you, Auntie," said Timmy with his cute smile. "You're welcome, precious," replied June, smiling back at her darling little sissy. Marcia was waiting for them at the cash register, and the two women and Timmy went to it now. Marcia boxed the polka dot dress with the long gloves June had worn to the store, the other mother and daughter dresses, and Timmy's other dresses. His other panties, ankle socks, and bouffant slips were put in some of the store's large paper bags, the lacy bottom edges of his bouffant slips sticking out a little from the top of them, and his Mary Jane shoes inside a box in a separate bag. She had removed the price tags from the things they'd put on before they went into the dressing room and added up everything on the cash register. "June," said Barbara, "let me pay for half the price of his dresses and things." "That's not necessary, Barbara," replied June. "I collected my husband's GI insurance, and on a much better life insurance policy he already had before he went to Korea. Money won't be a problem for me any longer. I'm not rich, but I've got enough money to last me for the rest of my life, actually more than I'll probably ever need." "Well, I get plenty of alimony from my ex-husband," said Barbara. "Lawyers make good money. Let me pay for something at least. After all, it's for a wonderful good cause." June grinned and said, "Oh, just give me $5 if it means that much to you." Instead, Barbara fished a $10 bill out of her pocketbook and handed it to June, insisting that she take it. June paid the bill and 3 salesgirls carried everything down to the parking lot and placed them on the back seat of her car. 15 minutes later, June was holding Timmy by the hand as they went up the steps into Francine's beauty parlor or salon, Timmy's bouffant slip whispering in a delightful manner as it moved against the skirts of his little dress. Francine was aware of June's plan for dressing her little nephew like a girl. She knew it was something some other customers of hers did, usually just for a day or two, but in some cases, for their entire summer vacations from school or even longer. There were several other women in town that had also turned their little boys into sissies. She smiled as she thought of how nice it would make June feel when she was putting her little sissy in a pretty dress and things each morning. Just then they came into her salon, Francine being a little surprised to see Barbara Cummings with her, though she knew Barbara was June's dearest friend. She paused in her work on a woman's hair and bent down to Timmy. "Well, is this your little girl June?" asked Francine. "Gloves and pocketbook too. She's a real little lady. And you're wearing pretty pink gingham mother and daughter dresses. That's so sweet. Gingham's such a pretty and dainty pattern." "Yes," answered June. "She used to be my little nephew, but now she's my little niece, and she likes wearing a dress like her auntie's dress. Don't you, sweetheart?" "Yes, Auntie. It's fun wearing a dress like your dress," said Timmy with a big smile. "When I get big, I want to be a pretty lady like you, Auntie." Francine bent down, gave Timmy a hug and kissed his cheek. Timmy giggled and smiled. "What's your little girl's name?" asked Francine. "It was Timmy when she was a boy," said June. "But it's Tammy now." "Oh, that's a nice name for a pretty little girl like she is," replied Francine, still smiling at Timmy. "Do you like being a girl, sweetheart?" "Yes," answered Tammy with his cute smile. "I'm glad I'm a girl now." "I bet you're overjoyed to have such a pretty little girl," said Francine. "I can imagine all the fun things you'll be doing with Tammy." "I hadn't really thought about it in any detail, Fran," replied June, "but now that you mention it, I suppose we will have lots of fun together. Just dressing Tammy up pretty made me feel so good, and Tammy liked it too." "Go ahead and sit down and I'll be with you in a couple of minutes," said Francine. They went over to some padded chairs along the wall and June said, "Tammy, watch how Mrs. Cummings sits down." Barbara turned around in front of the chair to face them, then put her hands behind her and smoothed her dress and petticoats under her as she sat down. "Now you sit down the same way, Tammy," instructed June. Tammy was a bright little boy, and copied the way Barbara had just sat down. Then June sat down next to him on his other side. That's right, sweetheart, said June. Girls and ladies always sit down that way. That's so they won't get wrinkles in their poofy slips and pretty dresses. Always sit down that way like a good little girl. I will, Auntie, said Tammy, still with his cute smile. Barbara looked at Tammy's dress. The short puffed sleeves on little girls' dresses are so cute, said Barbara. Yes, agreed June with a loving smile at Tammy's dress. All the dresses we bought for Tammy today have them. But I'll probably be buying some sleeveless dresses with shoulder straps and a square boat neckline for Tammy when the weather gets hot, and maybe some little petticoats instead of bouffant slips for her. That'll be cooler in the summer. Francine smiled again as she heard June talking about her little sis's future. Soon she was finished with the customer in the styling chair. The lady got up, paid, tipped and thanked Francine, then left the salon after giving her dress and petticoats a rustling shake to fluff them up in front of a full-length mirror near the door. Come to me, Tammy, said Francine as she bent down and held her arms and hands open in front of her. It's time to make your hair look pretty, sweetheart. Tammy got off the chair and walked over to Francine with a big smile. She easily lifted him up into the styling chair with a thick pad on it she used to raise the height of the little girls whose hair she styled. Tell me, June, said Francine. How did you manage to keep Tammy's hair so long while she was in school? I've been kind of planning this for the past year or so. I still have my teacher's certificate and qualified as a single parent to get the Free State textbooks so I could give Tammy home schooling for the past year. And I'll have plenty of time to be with my little girl even after school starts in the September by continuing with her homeschooling. Pardon the expression, June, but I think Tammy's as cute as a bug's ear, said Francine as she smiled at Tammy and examined his hair. What a fun-filled life you'll have being your little girl. By the way, it looks and smells like you gave Tammy a shampoo today. Yes, replied June. I gave him a Breck shampoo while he was in his bubble bath this morning. That's the best store-bought shampoo on the market, said Francine. I use a professional one that gives a little more sheen to hair. But Tammy's hair looks fine already. Francine opened a drawer in the counter under the long mirror and took out a little bottle of pink fingernail polish. June, put one of the folding chairs at the back of the room alongside Tammy and paint her fingernails while I work on her hair, said Francine, handing the bottle to her. But before you start, tell me how you'd like Tammy's hair done. Nothing fancy, Fran, answered June. Just a ponytail and bangs would look nice. That'll be easy, said Francine. And Tammy will look even cuter than she is now once I tie it up with a nice big bow. All the women were now using the feminine pronouns she and her when they were talking about June's cute little sissy. Barbara began looking through a copy of McCall's, a fashion magazine. Fran, you don't think I'm doing something wrong having Timmy become Tammy, do you? Asked June. Wrong? Nonsense, answered Francine. Tammy'll love being her nice auntie's pretty little girl and playing with other little girls. I think so too, Fran, said June. I think it's important for Tammy to be a little girl so she can have her childhood fun playing with her little girlfriends. I don't blame you a bit, whatever your reasons, said Francine. She looks so precious in her little dress. Tell me, June, continued Francine, where do you buy your petticoats? Oh, in the department stores and sometimes in a dress shop, answered June. Why? Ever been to the Little Princess dress shop? Asked Francine. No, replied June. Is that a new store? Yes. A Mrs. Simmons from Boston opened it up a week ago on Summer Street, answered Francine. She has a better grade of girls' clothes than the other stores in town. She sells clothes for girls from toddler up to the age of 13 or 14, and her selection of panties, bouffant slips and dresses is very nice. You should check it out. I'm sure you'll like it, and her prices are quite reasonable. Perhaps next week, replied June. I've done enough shopping for one day. Besides, I have to start getting supper ready when we get home. Supper, huh? Said Francine. Still revealing your Yankee origins by the words you use. I know most people say dinner now when they refer to the evening meal, said June. But how come they call some restaurants supper clubs? Good question, answered Francine. I guess it's just an old term they think fits. By the way, Fran, would you care to dine with us tonight? Asked June. We're having pot roast. There'll be plenty to go around. I'd love to, answered Francine, but I have a date tonight. Anybody we know? Asked Barbara. I doubt it, replied Francine. He just moved into the house next door to mine 3 days ago. But I'll take a rain check on your invitation. It'd be nice to see Tammy again. Just 3 days ago, said Barbara. You work fast, Fran. So does he, replied Francine with a wink, but not too fast, if you know what I mean. Just phone me when you have a free evening, offered June. I'd love to have you join us. And you could see Tammy again, too. While they'd been talking, Francine had cut some bangs on Tammy's forehead, brought the rest of his black hair back and up from his neck, and tied it in a 6-inch ponytail with a 2-inch wide pink ribbon in a pretty bow to go with Tammy's pink gingham dress. The tag ends of the pert bow hung down a few inches, and his ponytail curled up outward a little at the end of it. Oh, yes, June, said Barbara when Francine was finished. Tammy looks darling with her ponytail. It would have been a waste to get it cut short for a pixie cut. She does look cute, doesn't she? Said June with a loving smile at Tammy. Cute? She's adorable, said Francine smiling at Tammy. Then she dug out a pink lipstick from one of the drawers under the long counter. I'll put some pink lipstick on Tammy to match her pink gingham dress. Then I'll numb her earlobes to pierce them and put some gold-plated studs in them. Leave them in overnight, and tomorrow you can put some dainty pearl studs in them. But first I'm just going to thin her eyebrows a little. Finally Francine was finished and lifted Tammy down from the styling chair. She bent down and gave Tammy a hug and kissed his cheek. Goodbye, sweetheart, said Francine. Be a good little girl for your nice auntie, and always play nice with other little girls. Yes, Mrs. Fran. I will, said Tammy with his cute smile. June paid, tipped and thanked her, and they left the salon to go home. 1 week later. Once again June and Barbara were sitting on June's living room couch as they had iced tea and chatted. Barbara had just arrived a minute earlier with 2 large paper bags from a store. June made an effort to always refer to Tammy as she or her now, but sometimes she slipped up, saying he or him instead. Where's Tammy? Barbara asked. I'll show you, said June. Wait till you see. You're gonna love this. It's wonderful. Barbara followed June to her kitchen windows and together they looked out on June's patio and flower garden in the backyard. Hopscotch squares were drawn in chalk on the surface of the patio. June, exclaimed Barbara. Tammy's actually playing hopscotch with 2 other little girls. Who are they? Susan Conway and Nancy Evans. They live just down the street a little way. Their mothers brought them over about a half hour ago. Tammy loves playing little girls' games. He's so happy now. But he also plays with some other little sissies. There's Corinne Bellevaux's sissy nephew Marianne and Mrs. Sanford's sissy Maribeth. Gosh, said Barbara. I didn't know so many other women near us had little boys that were sissies. I'm not sure they were all sissies at first and liked wearing dresses and being taught to be good little girls, replied June. But any little boy will like being a little girl in a few days once he sees how nice it is to wear panties, poofy slips and pretty dresses. Personally, I think it's good for them. They'll probably treat women better when they grow up. There's 7 or 8 other real girls Tammy plays with also. It's just like I said it would be, replied Barbara with a smile. Tammy's little dress and bouffant slip bounce up and down every time he hops to another square. He's so cute. Oh, you're so lucky to have such a darling little sissy. I know, said June with a smile. It makes me feel so good to dress him up pretty every morning. But please don't say sissy when he can hear you. It might upset him if he found out what it means. He thinks he's my little girl now, and he is, except for a little difference inside his lacy panties. Where did Tammy learn to play hopscotch? Asked Barbara. The little girls and other sissies taught him, answered June. And he's so happy to have some little girlfriends now to play with. I knew Tammy would fit right in with them. June, did you ever think that maybe Tammy should have been born a girl? Barbara asked. Yes. I have, replied June. Perhaps I'm just correcting one of Mother Nature's mistakes. Tammy's so happy now being my little girl. I love to cuddle with him on the couch while we watch television after supper. The day after we first went shopping for Tammy, I bought 4 pretty little nighties for him. Someday I'd like to go shopping in White Plains. There's more stores and dress shops to buy things for him, and for myself as well. I always wished I'd had a little girl, but I got divorced before I could get pregnant, said Barbara. I always wanted a little girl too, said June. But my husband died in Korea from a heart attack. We had decided to wait till he got home before having any children. But Tammy helps me to forget the unhappiness of that time. I know he's really my sissy nephew, but now it's just as if he was my little niece. It makes me feel so good. Here's a picture of us jumping rope together in one of our mother and daughter dress sets. What a sweet remembrance for you. Does Tammy play jacks too? Asked Barbara. Yes, I taught him how, answered June, and how to make a little curtsy, too. I want him to behave like a good little girl should now. Oh, he looks darling, June, said Barbara, just like a pretty little girl. I've already taken some other nice pictures of him, said June. If Tammy does grow up to be a teenage boy later, at least I'll have the pictures to remind me what a darling little sissy I had for a few years. I keep them in a separate photo album I bought recently. My camera has a timer delay on it, so I was able to take pictures of Tammy and myself cuddling on the couch together, and jumping rope together. But the ones I really like best are the pictures I took of him playing with little girls and the other sissies. He likes playing with his little girlfriends now, and isn't lonely and sad anymore. I love to hear him giggle and laugh. How do the other little girls treat him? Asked Barbara. Just the same as they'd treat another real little girl, said June. They all think he is one. By the way, there's another little boy in the neighborhood whose mother dresses him like a little girl. My friend Jane Belmore petticoated her little boy also. Usually he plays with Tammy too. His name is Charlene now instead of Charles. Really? Isn't he with them now? Asked Barbara. Not today, explained June. His mother took him with her when she went to visit some other friends of hers today. She said she loves showing him off to other ladies. They all make such a nice big fuss over him. I wasn't aware so many women in the neighborhood were petticoating their little boys, said Barbara. But I hardly blame them. Having a little sissy and teaching him to be a good little girl must be so nice. Just helping you to shop for Tammy was so much fun. I don't think petticoating is as uncommon a thing to do as I did before, replied June. And I know I did the right thing, since Tammy must have been a sissy. He loves being my little girl now, and it makes me feel so good to see him in a pretty little dress. I suppose all women feel the same way about their little girls. He really seems to have adapted well to wearing his little dresses and bouffant slips, observed Barbara as they continued to watch Tammy playing hopscotch with the neighbors' little girls. Yes, he has. A sissy's instinct, I guess, said June with a little laugh. And it's not so noisy in the house now. Sissies and girls don't make as much noise when they play with their dolls as regular little boys make playing cops and robbers or soldiers. He really plays with dolls now? Asked Barbara. Yes, answered June. The day I bought his little nighties, I also bought him a cute magic skin doll, and a couple of rag dolls. He takes one of the rag dolls with him to bed now along with his teddy bear. June, I'd never have known he was a boy in girl's clothes if I hadn't been with you when we took him shopping, dressed him and had his hair done at Francine's. He really does look like a cute little girl now. And he behaves like a good little girl too, said June. No yelling in the house when he and the real girls play together with their dolls. Little boys are a lot noisier. And he keeps his knees and feet together when he's standing or sitting down like a little girl, too. There's something else I do with Tammy now when it's his bedtime. I got a prescription for some lactation pills, and I have him come to bed with me and breastfeed him till he falls asleep. Then I carry him back to his own bed. He looks forward to it every night now. I bet you do too, said Barbara, as she opened the 2 paper bags she had brought with her from a store. I know I'd love to do it. By the way, June, I bought Tammy a nice little pastel blue dress, a white bouffant slip to wear under it, and a matching blue hair bow. And I got him some more pretty rumba panties too. Thanks, Barbara, said June. You really shouldn't have. Still, I suppose every little girl or sissy should have lots of panties, poofy slips and pretty dresses to wear. Soon it was almost 5 o'clock, and the little girls Tammy was playing with were picked up by their mothers and went home. Before making supper, June and Barbara took Tammy upstairs to his bedroom and changed him into the little blue dress Barbara had bought for him. Then June took a picture of him back downstairs, kneeling up on a bamboo porch chair she'd brought into the living room with his white cotton gloves on. She had untied his ponytail to let his wavy black hair hang down and put the pretty matching blue hair bow on top of it. 1 year later, spring, 1954. Tammy's 8th birthday was only a day away, and June pulled all stops. She had taken him shopping at the Little Princess dress shop, the store just for little girls Francine had told her about. When they left, besides having bought Tammy some more panties, bouffant slips and some new dresses in the larger size he wore now, she had also bought him a pink cotton party dress, with all the frills, bows and lacy decorations they have. It even had little faux jewels on it and had its own pretty 4-layered petticoat sewn into it. Tammy loved it when he saw it on himself in the store's tall 3-sided mirror. He could hardly wait for his little girlfriends they were going to invite to the party to see how pretty his party dress was. By now, June's other friends had visited her and met Tammy. They all thought he made a darling little girl. June had also invited the other petticoated little sissies in the neighborhood to the party along with their mothers or aunts. After June had nursed Tammy at her breast, she tucked him back in his pretty canopy bed, and Barbara helped June decorate the living room. Colorful twisted crepe paper streamers crisscrossed just below the ceiling, and they blew up 24 balloons and tied them to the streamers. June had baked a big birthday cake and stuck a lot more than 8 little candles in the frosting to make it look more festive. Then both women worked together making 2 large pitchers of slightly sweet lemonade. Afterwards, June and Barbara wrapped Tammy's presents June had bought for him in some pretty gift paper and tied them up with pink ribbon having a nice bow on top. Tammy's presents were just what you'd expect for an 8-year-old little girl: some new dresses, bouffant slips, boxed sets of pretty panties, more books of paper dolls, coloring books, and jigsaw puzzles for little girls. Barbara had already wrapped her own presents for June's huggable little sissy, but kept them at home till the next day. The next day was Tammy's birthday, and around 1 o'clock that afternoon the mothers with their own little girls began to arrive at June's house. June was glad to see Jane Belmore with her darling sissy Charlene as well. He had also turned 8 years old a month earlier. Sissy Marianne came too with his pretty aunt, Corinne Bellevaux. June had dressed Tammy in his pretty pink party dress with a pink bouffant slip under it and pink panties trimmed with white lace. She'd untied his long ponytail again, and his long hair was hanging down his back in long waves, with a pink bow on the top of his hair. Tammy was very excited, and a big smile was on his face all day. June had coated his lips with a pink lipstick and put a pink nail polish on his fingernails. Dainty pearl studs were in his pierced earlobes. Being spring, she thought he should wear his white shoes that had a strap and buckle like his black Mary Janes. His ankle socks were pink to match his dress. Barbara gave Tammy a hug and kissed his cheek, telling him how pretty his dress was. Then she placed her present for Tammy on the coffee table in the living room. As the other women arrived, most of them wearing white or a light color summer dress, June greeted them at the door, placing her cheek near theirs without actually touching so they wouldn't smudge each other's makeup. Tammy curtsied nice to the ladies like June had taught him to do to ladies, and the women helped June by wheeling in a utility cart covered by a small tablecloth with the birthday cake on it, setting out the silverware and making sure everything was ready. As soon the refreshments had been served and they'd all sang happy birthday, Tammy had blown out the candles on his birthday cake, then unwrapped all his presents and thanked all the little girls and sissies that had given him a present, though they'd actually been picked out and bought by their mothers, aunts and stepmothers. June, Jane, Corinne, Mrs. Sanford and Barbara looked on with loving smiles at the sissies and little girls. Sissies Charlene, Marybeth and Marianne had given him presents, and had also received the usual hugs and kisses on their cheeks by all the women when they arrived. "Sweetheart," said June, "give Charlene, Marybeth and Marianne a nice kiss on the lips. They're going to be your girlfriends now, too." The sissies all came together in the middle of the living room and took turns leaning towards each other, one after the other, their hands a little away from the sides of their dresses for balance, and kissed each other as the women looked on with approving smiles and made gushy feminine comments about how precious they were. "Wasn't that nice?" said June. "Now you're all girlfriends and can play hopscotch and jacks and jump rope together. They can take turns having a sleepover together now too," said Jane. "Yes, sweetheart," June told Tammy. "You can tell each other your little girl secrets before you go to sleep." When Tammy had unwrapped all his presents and they'd all finished their cake, lemonade, and ice cream, June told Tammy, the real little girls and the other sissies they could go outside so they could play hopscotch together. They all eagerly went outside, and the women began to talk about their sissies' little girliness. "I'm so happy Tammy likes being my little girl," said June. "He loves wearing his panties, poofy slips and dresses now, and I'm always giving him hugs and kissing his cheeks." "Yes," said Corinne. "At first I petticoated my nephew Marianne because I don't particularly like little boys. But it was so much fun once he began to behave like a good little girl. Now his mother has sold her house and moved in with me so we could take turns dressing him in the morning. I love Charlene being my little girl too," said Jane. "I don't think he was a sissy when I first dressed him in some pretty clothes for a little girl. But after a little while, he liked it so much that I knew I made him a sissy, and now he behaves just like a real little girl. I couldn't be happier. Making a little boy a sissy and teaching him to behave like a good little girl makes me feel so wonderful." "I agree with you completely," said June. "And now I'm not lonely anymore. It was really a blessing having Timmy move in with me after his parents died in that awful accident. It's just as nice to have a little sissy as a real little girl. I'm going to see about getting Charlene hormone treatments and sexual reassignment surgery when he's a little older," said Jane Belmore. "Really, Jane?" replied June. "I've never even thought about that." "Maybe you should consider it, June," advised Jane. "Once a boy had been turned into a sissy, he'll never fit it with regular boys when he gets older. Besides, think how nice it would be to see him as your real teenage girl going to her first prom dance with a corsage on her pretty gown." "Oh, yes. It would be wonderful," admitted June. "I'll have to give it some thought. I certainly wouldn't want Tammy to be unhappy when he grows up." Christine Jorgensen has turned out to be a well-adjusted, happy and pretty woman following her hormone treatments and surgery, said Jane. "It's hard to believe she was once a man in the army." She said she loves wearing her garter belt, panties, her petticoats, and full dresses with her nylons and high heels. "I wonder how pretty a teenage girl he'd be if I do get him the surgery and hormone treatments," mused June. "I think he'd be a pretty young woman when he grows up. In a way, it'll be sort of sad though. He's such a cute little sissy. I sort of wish he didn't have to grow up. I just love having my nephew behaving like a good little girl now. He loves it when we wear our mother and daughter dresses. I've been so busy lately that I haven't really been able to show him off to all my other women friends yet. But making him a sissy if he wasn't one, and dressing him like my little girl has made both of us so happy. Actually, he may have been a sissy even before I petticoated him, so it was probably the best thing for his happiness and my own as well. Yes, agreed Jane Belmore. And Charlene would be very unhappy if I told him he had to be a boy again and couldn't wear dresses anymore. Psychiatric studies of sissies has shown that it becomes too ingrained in their psyche to be able to be well-adjusted and happy regular boys again after we've made them sissies. It really can't be undone without making them seriously disturbed and unhappy. They'll always have their happy memories of being pretty little girls haunting them if they don't become real teenage girls with hormone treatments and sex change surgery. I'll do whatever it takes to keep Tammy happy, said June. I owe it to him, and I know he'd love being a teenage girl and wearing a lovely gown when goes to his high school dances. I always did. Besides, being a woman is so much nicer than being a man. All they do is work and watch sports on television or play golf on their days off. They never know how nice it feels to be wearing a new dress or pretty petticoat. And keeping myself looking as pretty as I can is something I do to set a good example for Tammy. Then Corinne began talking about a dress sale she went to buy herself while Marianne stayed home with his mother, and the conversation drifted away from the talk about their sissies and was concerned just with buying their own dresses and lingerie. They were so occupied with their talking that they hadn't noticed the new Bic that had to park on the street with the overflow of cars because there was no room left in the driveway. A somewhat older woman went up the walk and pressed the button for the front door chimes, dying to see the darling little sissy in his party dress her daughter June had told her about. June answered the door. "Mother. I'm so glad you could make it to Tammy's party," said June. "Come in. Tammy's outside playing hopscotch with the other girls. But they'll be back in here soon. Hey everybody, this is my mother Shirley." Shirley was a little less than 50 years old and still a pretty woman. They gave each other a little hug. Shirley made a hello in the direction of the other women and sat down after handing her daughter a few birthday presents for Tammy. "It's not all that much, June," said Shirley. "Just a pretty little dress I saw on sale, and a pearl necklace with a matching bracelet. Every little girl or sissy should have some pearls to wear on special occasions. I hope they come back in soon. I'm dying to see Tammy in his party dress." "That's a very pretty dress you have on today, Mother," said June. "I got it at Best & Company. In Boston last week," Shirley replied. "I love Boston. It seems so much more cultured than hectic New York City. At noontime, I had a prime rib dinner with all the fixings at Dijon Park. But now I suppose I'll have to start dieting for a week. By the way, would you mind if I stayed here for a few days or perhaps a week? We could shop together for Tammy. I'd love to see him wearing a pretty little dress I'd bought for him." "Of course, Mother," answered June. "I'll make up the bed in the back spare room with some fresh sheets for you. The front spare room is Tammy's pretty bedroom now. You'll love it when you see it. I bought him a canopy bed with a lace-trimmed ruffled pink canopy. Its pillowcases have lace trim also. It's so pretty I almost wish I was a little girl again. Tammy loves it. Take a look in his closet and bureau drawers too. I've been buying him the prettiest panties, bouffant slips and dresses for a little girl I could find. The little lamb didn't have a chance of not becoming a sissy. I'm not positive he was already a sissy, not that it makes much difference now, because he loves being my little girl and playing with other sissies and real little girls. I'll have Tammy come in here for a few minutes so you can see him." Shirley and the rest of the women continued talking, while June went to the back door and called to Tammy, telling him to come inside for a few minutes. She held him by the hand and led him into the living room, and they stood together in front of Shirley. "Tammy, this is Auntie's mommy," said June. "Say hello to Grandma like a good little girl." Tammy curtsied like June had taught him to do when he met ladies and said, "Hi Grandma. Auntie bought me my party dress." "Aren't you a pretty little girl?" said Shirley. Let Grandma give you a nice big hug, sweetheart. She stood up and bent down as she wrapped her arms around Tammy, gave him a hug and kissed his cheek, making him giggle. You can go back out and play with the other girls now, Tammy, said Shirley. But always be nice to the other little girls when you play with them, sweetheart. I am Grandma, said Tammy with his cute smile. About 4 o'clock that afternoon the party came to an end, with the ladies collecting their little girls and sissies to go home. Tammy came back inside and began playing with a new doll that had been one of his birthday presents. The diapers that came with it were kept closed with sticky tabs instead of diaper pins that would be too dangerous for a little girl. June took Tammy upstairs to take his party dress off and change him into a different slip and dress. She decided to have Tammy wear a pink bouffant slip that had been one of his birthday presents. When it was on him, Tammy looked down at it with a happy smile. Then June put him in the pretty blue dress Barbara had bought for him. Tomorrow we'll put your hair back in a ponytail and bangs again, sweetheart, said June. Shirley always pitched in to help when she visited June, and had gone into the kitchen and began washing the ice cream dishes, plates for the cake, the silverware and the glasses used for the lemonade, and to put the remains of Tammy's birthday cake away while June began to stack the folding chairs she had rented to have enough seats for the party. Just as Shirley was washing the dishes, a thunderstorm began with bright close flashes of lightning, and very loud claps of thunder. Tammy came running into the kitchen crying. Grandma, Grandma, cried Tammy. Make it stop. I didn't know our little girl was afraid of thunder, said Shirley. I guess I'll have to do what the ladies out west do with their little girls when it thunders. Kneel down near the sink, sweetheart, and I'll hide you from the thunder and lightning. Tammy knelt down and looked up to see Shirley lifting her dress and petticoats up just before she dropped them down over him. You stay under my dress and petticoats till that bad old storm goes away, Tammy, said Shirley. The lightning won't know where you are now. You'll be safe there, precious. Then she continued drying the dishes with a dish towel and placing them in a rack on the sink's drain board. Later that evening, Tammy was sitting between June and Shirley watching Auntie's and Shirley's favorite television program, The Ann Southern Show. Miss Southern was a secretary in an office and always wore petticoats under her dresses. Auntie, asked Tammy, do all ladies and girls wear petticoats? Most ladies do, sweetheart, answered June, and all little girls wear poofy slips. Why, Tammy? Don't you like having your dresses stay out nice and pretty? Yes, Auntie, replied Tammy. I like to be pretty like you and Grandma are. But I saw a lady in the store when we went shopping that wasn't wearing any petticoats. Sometimes ladies don't wear them because their bosses won't allow them to wear them while they're working, explained June. Why? Persisted Tammy. Because men keep looking at them instead of paying attention to their work, explained June. Big boys and men like to see a lady's or girl's petticoats because they're so pretty. I'm glad I'm a girl, Auntie, said Tammy, 'cause I like wearing my dresses and slips a lot more than wearing blue jeans. 3 years later. Tammy was now 11 years old. He still received lots of nice presents on his birthdays, but June didn't have a big party for him anymore. Shirley would stay for a few days with them now and then, and go shopping with June and Tammy. Sometimes Jane Belmore would go with them. June would bring Tammy and Jane would bring Charlene. Charlene had become Tammy's best friend. You and Charlene are getting to be a big girls now, Tammy, June told him. Pretty soon you'll both be going to dances in front of the bandstand in the park after supper. At this point in his life, Tammy had hardly any memories of when he was a little boy, and the few memories that he did have were rapidly dimming and being replaced by his happy memories of his little girl years. June continued to take pictures of Tammy to keep in the big photo album she'd bought just for pictures of her sissy. One day Jane Belmore stopped in with Charlene. June, would you like to go with Charlene and me? Asked Jane. I want to get Charlene a pastel blue bouffant slip that'll go nice with her blue dresses. Mrs. Simmons' Little Princess Dress Shop advertised some in the paper. As a matter of fact, Jane, replied June, Tammy got a stain on one of her pink bouffant slips, and I'd like to get a replacement for it. I'll get Tammy ready to go and get my hat and gloves. I've been meaning to buy the slip for Tammy for a few days now. The weather's nice today, so we might as well take advantage of it. Francine said the dress shop is very nice. They made a quick drive downtown and soon Jane had parked her car along the sidewalk about a block away from the store. Seems to be a lot of shoppers out today, said Jane. Guess we'll have to walk a little way to the store. As they began walking down the sidewalk, June checked to see that Tammy wasn't swinging his arms like boys do when they walk, and was taking smaller steps like girls do. She was pleased to see her sissy keeping his hand on top of his little pocketbook that hung from his left shoulder, and just kept his right arm and hand down along the side of his dress when he walked. A glance at Charlene showed Jane had properly trained her sissy to walk the same way. Both sissies also copied the limp wrist of girls and women, and always kept their knees and feet together when they were standing or sitting down. Neither sissy hadn't been afraid to be seen in public for quite a while now, nor did they have to be. Both of them really looked like 11-year-old girls. In a way Charlene's a little luckier than Tammy, said June. Just about all colors go well with her natural blonde hair. Francine offered to dye Tammy's hair blonde, but I think her black hair is pretty enough, especially when she wears the pink hairband she's wearing today. Mrs. Simmons' face reminded June of her mother, and was a very patient and helpful woman when she waited on her customers. Once Jane had told them what they were looking for, she led them to 3 long racks of bouffant slips. After only 4 or 5 minutes, both June and Jane had picked out the slips they wanted to buy for their sissies, now getting close to their 12th birthday. Girls, we'll go to the dressing rooms and have you try them on now to make sure they fit, said Jane. The 2 women went into the dressing rooms with their sissies to help them. Then they went out and the sissies stood together in front of the women. Some panties, petticoats, bouffant slips and petit panties were either hung on the wall or lying around waiting to be put away in the stockroom. June took her camera from her big pocketbook to take a picture of them. Face this way and together girls, said June. Tammy, hold up the extra panties that come with the slip. That's it. Now don't move. Her camera flashed and another picture would soon be in June's photo album of her sis's preteen years. They're growing up so fast, said Jane. Yes, agreed June. They'll be teenagers in another year or so. Soon they'll be getting their hair permed at Francine's salon and going together to the dances in the park. I'm glad Charlene is such a good girl. She's just the type of girl I want Tammy to have for her best friend. Well, I've tried my best to teach Charlene to be a good girl, said Jane. No need to worry, Jane, said June. You definitely succeeded. When Charlene comes to my home for a sleepover with Tammy, she's always very polite to me. By the way, I've been thinking about getting the sex change surgery and hormone treatments for Tammy. I'm glad to hear it, June, replied Jane. It's really the best thing for both of them. I couldn't bear to have Charlene being unhappy for the rest of his life. And we both know they'll love being women during their adult years. But we'll have to go to the town hall and get their ages changed. They're supposed to be 18 to get the surgery done. But Dorothy Gibson, the sex change surgeon, explained to me that the surgery and hormones are much more effective if it's done before their bodies start changing during puberty. We'll sign their names to the permission forms for them. We know perfectly well what will keep them happy when they grow up. The women in town refer to her sissy patients as Gibson girls after it's done. Isn't that cute? We owe it to them for their future happiness. You're right, Jane, said June. Besides, it's for our own happiness as well theirs. Just the thought of letting Tammy grow up and be a man is too awful to contemplate. And I'm sure it would make him very unhappy to not be able to wear petticoats and dresses anymore. But the operation was such an invasive type of surgery that June really still had some doubts about getting her sissy hormone treatments and the sex change surgery. As a result, the day came when she told Tammy that it was time for him to be a boy again. Tammy off and on cried for the rest of the day. But June stuck to her guns and tried to explain to him that he really was a boy, and he had to begin behaving like a big boy now. However, it still took Tammy a week before he went along with the idea. Now June had to teach him how boys behave and play sports. But June had trained him to be a girl so well that it took another week before he stopped putting his hands behind him and smoothing his blue jeans under him when he sat down. Eventually Tammy, now Timmy again, finished high school and went to college. As mentioned before, Timmy was a bright little boy, and next he decided to go to medical school on a scholarship he'd won, and become a doctor. He graduated from medical school with the second highest marks in his class, did his internship at a local hospital, finished his residency and set up a practice in his hometown as a general practitioner. He still lived with his Aunt June. But when he was home he often thought back to his happy days when his aunt had made him her little girl. It seemed like something special was missing in his life. When personal computers became commonplace, Dr. McKay, formerly Tammy, bought one and set about learning about them as much as he could. Soon he was a regular computer geek. One evening after work, he was exploring different websites and found Petticoat Power. There was an ad on it by a woman known as Karen that sold dresses and petticoats for adult little girls. He quickly ordered 4 of the prettiest dresses for little girls in his adult size, along with some panties and little girl petticoats to wear under it from a seller on another website called eBay. Shoes were a bit of a problem, but after a while he found and bought from an internet dealer some white strap and buckle shoes in his size, and wore them with his little girl clothes. Rather trying to keep his intentions a secret which would only be found out sooner or later by his aunt, he told her about it. June had smiled and said she'd help him. By now June was no longer a young woman, but she felt like a young mother now that she had a little girl living with her again.